Some of our board members are still coming over from the other building. We had an executive session earlier.
You have the clicker?
I'm hearing a lot of feedback, so, a lot of
Just wondering if anybody else had
microphones
to
might
do
be
it.
on. Let's turn them all off.
I think they are on.
Yeah, turn them all off.
We got him in for about, not
Yeah,
long,
let's turn everybody off.
just for a couple minutes.
Well, that, and we can turn the speakers up here, too.
Thank you.
Everybody turn their speakers off, unless you're talking.
Oh, we got new ones.
Here's the.
We've got a rather full agenda, so I'm going to call the August 17th, 2021, 11 a.m. monthly work session to order. The first item is the ESE update, and we've got quite a few people here to speak. Maybe you could introduce yourselves.
Should we start?
Yes, go ahead and start, Sonia, if you would.
Okay, good morning. And my name is Sonia Figueredo Alberts, and I am the Executive Director for Executive Education here in Sarasota County.
Hi, good morning. I'm Tammy Castles. I'm the ESE Director here in Sarasota County. Nice to see you all this morning.
Good morning, everybody. Chris Renoff, Chief Academic Officer here in Sarasota County.
Hi, good morning. I'm Elizabeth Lewis, and I'm a program specialist with the ESE department.
Good morning, Deb Jackalone, Executive Director for Student Services.
Good morning, Mary Ellen Asplin, Professional Development Coordinator for Sarasota County Schools.
And I'm going to take over as we begin this presentation. Many of you have already received the binder that was sent to all of you for information and support documentation. So thank you again for having us this morning to allow us to provide an update to you and our community members of our continuous improvement and our efforts. We take any corrective action to the highest level of responsibility. And we're humbled to tell you that these processes allow us to focus, provide analysis, and really focusing on how we can continue servicing our students, our families, with clear expectations and information. This morning in front of you, we're going to walk you through the 5 outcomes that were imposed on us by the Commissioner of Education and the work that we have been involved in looking at what needs to change, delete, or adjust so our students, our families, and our teachers continue receiving the highest level of supports. I'm going to ask you if you would like to hold your questions after every single condition presentation so we can respond accordingly. Is that okay with the board?
Yes, and I also want to remind the board members, we've got 60 minutes for this, and we've got Dr. Gordillo from Sarasota Memorial will be on the phone at noon. So we will hopefully get finished by then, so that we can talk to him about some COVID issues, which are very important.
Absolutely. That is our intent. So we're going to begin with our focus. You want to click? So our outcomes corrective action, you have in front of you the 5 corrective actions that were placed upon us and the work that has been done here in the district between departments in really looking at every single process, every single information, communication, and how we engage our students in the instruction, our parents in the information, and our teachers receiving those services. Our intent this morning is to give you a summary of the work and how we continue to improve our services for students with disability. The 5 conditions, it engages us in using a professional development protocol. It also engages us in developing and submitting a plan for professional development, 20 additional hours in those schools that have been selected. We have and continue to review and update policies and procedures based on legislative changes. Condition 3 is we submit an enormous amount of reports because we're auditing files, we're auditing programs, we're auditing services for students. We also have a very inclusive parent training for our parents that have students with significant cognitive disability. And at the end of August, we will be submitting our annual review of every single condition and updates on the work that we have been engaged. Lessons learned. We have learned a lot through this process, and we continue to learn to adjust. We have learned that IEPs can be very intimidating for the staff, for the parents, so we need to continue improving how we meet and invite and collaborate with our parents, with our teachers, and for our students. We have learned that it is important that we address parent concerns immediately and provide clarity and explanation to parents in an effort to build and maintain relationships. We have learned that professional learning to instructional and classified personnel should be personalized and meaningful. We have learned that training must be relevant and personalized based on the needs to include all stakeholders. We also have learned, because of your support, we added program managers too, to our program specialists, that we continue to develop structures to assist in collecting and monitoring.
Your mic went out?
Brennan?
No.
Is this on?
See, we got these new improved mics.
I know.
We're just testing them out.
So in the process, we have also learned that we need to continue developing structures to assist teams in collecting and monitoring data, to assist school-based teams in the problem-solving process. Our program managers and program specialists should align procedures with federal regulations and state statutes to provide clarity to the school-based teams. It is a continuous process of conversation, problem-solving, and collaboration. Procedures should be clearly outlined in written format and easily accessible to all stakeholders. And after each meeting and training, it is important to solicit immediate feedback and ask for questions in an effort to provide clarity. We're moving to condition one. Condition one has two steps. Step number one was requiring the district to engage in a professional development protocol, and condition B is submitting the design of an additional 20-hour professional development for teachers and all staff in our schools. Mary Ellen?
Thank you. Good morning again. Between January and April 2021, my responsibility was to lead our district team through the FDOE Professional Development Protocol in conjunction with UPD Consulting. The scope of work had multiple stages listed as in your binders, as well as extensive additional engagement beyond the prescriptive steps, including but not limited to planning, review, revision, debriefing, documentation, site visit preparation, and action plan formation and implementation. Through this work, we were able to narrow our scope of work and our area of focus and our problem of practice, and we determined that was the multi-tiered system of supports in our district, and the result was the creation of the PDP action plan for Sarasota County Schools. The final letter of plan approval from the FDOE just arrived last week on August 11th, and that will be included in our August update summary. Our action plan landed with 4 strategies, as you can see on the screen. Each had multiple steps for these actions, and they are detailed in your binders. The first strategy was to develop a mission and vision for our district's multi-tiered system of supports, and our second strategy was to include our MTSS vision and mission in the district's strategic plan. Next slide, please. This is what we came up with and what we put before our ACT and our cabinet. Sarasota County Schools District MTSS Vision Statement, maximizing learning for every student through responsive instruction, and the Sarasota County Schools district MTSS statement, empowering all students through a multi-tiered system of supports by using evidence-based practices, focusing on data-based problem solving and progress monitoring to ensure that all students in the district are provided equitable access to the instruction and the supports that they need to be academically, social, emotionally, and behaviorally successful. As I said, you can also see our MTSS belief statements, our vision and mission at the end of your binder, at the end of Condition 1, if you'd like to read that in more detail. And these were indeed submitted to ACT and to the Cabinet. They were approved, and therefore we were able to use these beliefs to guide our work of the team to continue moving forward with implementing the strategies. Ms. Jackalone will now highlight the rest of the action plan and where we currently are.
Thank you so much. The next part of our action plan has to do with our professional learning opportunities centered around our multi-tiered system of supports. We're really excited about this work, and the ESE team and the student services team, along with our curriculum experts, have been working very hard to ensure that this training is dispersed throughout the district. Our training started with a district-wide PLC that is really focused on guiding the work of the multi-tiered system of support. All of our district and school-based leaders engaged in an overview of the MTSS process framework that was focused on our mission, vision, and beliefs, and they participated in a PLC focused on school-based supports. All of our instructional staff had the opportunity to engage in a self-paced virtual MTSS module. To date, we have over 1,500 staff that have completed this online module. We have staff that have been engaged in the IEP and 504 accommodations virtual training. Here we also have 1,500 staff to date that have engaged in this process. These two virtual options will be ongoing with a completion date of August 31st, and highlighting our summary will be included in our annual report to the DOE. We've established a strong partnership with USF, the PSRTI project, and they have agreed to support us in a year-long professional learning focused on improving our multi-tiered system of support for every student in our district. We are working diligently to create a draft MTSS manual, and at this time it is being edited so final revisions can be made and shared with all stakeholders. Our school leaders and our school-based teams are going to be participating in something called the SAM. The SAM is a self-assessment for MTSS. This assessment will highlight each school's strengths and give us areas to capitalize our focus for improvement. We are going to continue to explore the expansion of a digital MTSS system that will help us manage data and ensure evidence-based interventions are happening for every student. Again, this work is focused on what we're doing for our kids every day in our schools. The last strategy leads into Ms. Castle's presentation because it is focused in on the 20-hour professional learning that we are going to be specifically designing for our stakeholders. Ms. Castles?
Okay. Strategy number 4, we're going to be implementing a 20-hour professional development plan to identify staff members related to support for students with cognitive disabilities in general education classrooms. And the target sites for year 1 will be 3 schools. 1 will be Laurel Nokomis Schools, 1 will be Lamarck Elementary, and 1 will be Brookside Middle School. And those sites were chosen based on the following data points: analysis of number of students participating on access points, the LRE percentage per student at each within that school, and then the time spent with non-disabled peers. And then the implementation of continuous progress monitoring plan to ensure positive student impact it will be continuous as we move forward. At this time, we have concluded our summary of Condition 1. So before we move to Condition 2, do you have any questions for Condition 1?
Yeah, we can go on. Good job.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair, why does this mic keep turning off and on? Is
Mine too.
that something special? We had no instruction. It's a green light, but
I've got this little buzzer at my desk, and I can just do that, just so I can see what you're doing.
Hot mic.
I don't know what's happening back there, but just keep an eye on your microphones, because the little light might be coming on, and that means you're hot. Mike,
Okay. Are we ready?
go ahead.
Okay.
Just a little technical issue here.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Condition 2 is an update and review of policies and procedures. So we were tasked to identify essential district staff when we participate in monthly targeted technical assistance and desktop monitoring, along with Florida Department of Education. And the collaboration began in March of 2021, and we will continue to collaborate with DOE through the 2022-23 school year. And the identified leads are Mr. Jose Castillo and Ms. Lisa Yount. They work closely alongside us, and they work with problem-solving response to intervention through the USF project. And they assist us with policies and procedure reviews. We've worked closely with them, and they provide feedback to us, and we've worked diligently alongside them on a monthly basis since March. We have updated procedures regarding placement of students on access points. We've updated documents and developed a monitoring process. Along with that process, we have an impact data folder this past school year that we created, and then we've continued the process and made sure that we created the process, and we made it a little bit more streamlined, and we'll discuss that a little bit later about the structure that we put in place to make sure that we have a little bit better monitoring system when we monitor our students who have now been placed on FSA from FSAA. We developed, as Ms. Jackalone had discussed, and Ms. Asplin about the MTSS manual. We discussed that, and we've developed that and put that into place, and we are looking forward to the feedback that we will receive from Mr. Castillo and Ms. Yount. We continue to have the ongoing collaboration with the PSRTI project. That is the conclusion of Condition 2, the summary. Do you have any questions about Condition 2?
Okay.
Keep going.
We move to Condition 3. Condition 3 is a summary of district continuous self-assessment of records. We have to submit records, any district in the state of Florida, and we are part of that continuous improvement of self-assessment. We also have to look at reevaluation and review of identified students that are on FSAA to make sure that we have followed the eligibility and corrective process for them. And we have to analyze local resources, and in that summary that we submit on a quarterly basis, if we add any additional paraprofessionals, if we adjust teacher allocations, all those requirements are included in that summary to FDOE. Condition 3 also asks us to individualize data review to ensure students met criteria. This is the rule 6A-10943. There is a revision as of July 1st. In this rule, we are on the process of waiting technical assistance, all districts in the state of Florida from the Department of Education of what does that look like and how do we move forward to adjust our process. So this is continues to revolve, and we are always in collaboration and in communication with FDOE to make sure that we continue informing our parents, informing our teachers, our staff, how to really design good instruction for our children and our students. We have also created monitoring reports, and IDEA has a lot of very specific rules for parents and rights for parents. So we have continued to ensure that our parental permission has been obtained for students when they transition to an alternative assessment. We have to assure that parental permission has been obtained if an IEP team is recommending a separate day school. We look at status of post-secondary training and supports are in place for those students, and teacher and paraprofessional training and certification status. All these components need to be included in the summaries that we provide quarterly to FDOE and our summary that is coming up August 31st. All these data points will be included. Condition 3 also addresses the need to increase percentage of students with significant cognitive disability in the general education setting, so that is aligned to those, the 3 schools that we selected based on data, and we will continue working at that. You at times have heard me say special ed is not a place but a service, so we will continue working with school-based teams to make that happen. We also have to include consistent and ongoing monitoring of data collection, student and school-specific, ongoing monitoring of post-secondary training and supports, and individualized data review to ensure students meet criteria against aligned to the new rule and the rule that has been in place for students that have a significant cognitive disability. So this is the end of condition 3. Do we go on?
Yep.
Okay. We're moving to condition 4. That's parent training list.
So condition 4 is the parent training and support plan for families of students with significant cognitive disabilities. And Sarasota County has continued to offer engaging learning opportunities for parents and families of those students with significant cognitive disabilities who are participating in Access Points instruction. This last year, we offered a variety of opportunities to our families, including morning and evening sessions, and we also repeated the presentations throughout the year so that there were more availability. As you can see in the slide, the different kinds of presentations we had. So one of the things we looked at was increasing participation, because we kind of started out really low and we're building. So the ESE department worked to identify some of those barriers, and as a result, we developed this parent learning communication checklist. And this tool outlines the process and procedures defining what needs to occur, and it says beginning 4 weeks beforehand, the day of your training, and then the week after. So everything is outlined, and presenters now have a consistent method to address how families will be informed of upcoming events, including all the different ways to get the messages out there, and how information is going to be shared afterwards to families, including resources and PowerPoints and connections. And we also have part of that is the survey to get feedback so we can continually improve the process. And when you look at the data on the slide, as we rolled out this checklist and started using it, participation started to increase. At our last event, we had 18 families that participated, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a good growth for us. And 2 of those families came from outside Sarasota County. They're families that were moving into here. And because they looked at the website, the Sarasota County website, they saw the event. They knew their children were on Access Points, and they wanted to learn more and plan ahead. So that was a nice side effect. We also had a great turnout for our ESE virtual agency fair with 155 families participating, and having that opportunity to meet local agencies and learn more about the supports and services they may be able to access for their children. The process continued this year, and just last week at our parent advisory meeting, we had 126 participants that were virtual or in person. So this new process is working to get the message out. And as part of this process, we started with this foundational presentation that we were giving, what is FSAA? And from feedback from families, from our ESD department, working with Access Project, the discretionary DOE project, we've updated our presentation, and recently it was vetted and approved by Florida Department of Education. And this presentation provides a clear overview to families and parents defining what access points are, how students are determined eligible for Access Points instruction or FSAA, Florida Standards Alternate Assessment of Participation, and the implications that parents need to consider when consenting to Access Points instruction. Information that's being shared with the families is also rolling out to our teachers, liaisons, administrators, support staff, so everybody that's working with that student has consistent information and are building their knowledge of what FSAA is and Access Points, so all IEP team members can be on the same page. So,
I have a question on that. Some of these, it obviously looks like not a lot of people attended them. The information that was there, is that now available for them to access online, or did they have to be there, and if they didn't
we had a master list of all of our students that are on Access Points, and the presentations were either emailed to them or they were regular mailed, so parents had the opportunity to get what was presented. and resources that were shared. And that was true of all of the different ones, the deferral presentations, the transition
Oh,
plan.
so that might be why we didn't have people in person, because you'd already sent them the information?
After the last week is sending out the information and the resources, so we sent it out.
And, well, that's good, because I think a lot of times, parents can't make it on the day you've chosen or the time you've chosen. So if they have access to this information, and I was at the last one, and it didn't seem like the place for a parent to go if there were specific problems they might have been having with their student. That had to be done at the school. But this was more of an overall umbrella. This is how the system works. If you have a problem with how the system is working, tell us what that is. And I think you took all those notes and we're looking at making the system better for parents. But again, still, if you have problems with a student, that's best handled at the school level. So I appreciate that. And I think parents had a better idea of where it is and where they're going. And I appreciate your ongoing work with the parents.
Thanks.
So that takes us to condition 5. Condition 5 is a summary by which the district, us as a department, have to continue doing a summary of every single component of all the conditions, and we continue to provide all the factors, the data, the supports, to make sure that our continuous progress doesn't stop, but continues improving the services for our students, families, and our staff. This condition takes us to 5A and B with very specific requirements, to 5C with 3 additional narratives. We completed one in July. We're ready to complete one upcoming in August. So we are submitting all the data that is required on the work. This is meaningful work. It's not just submitting paperwork to Florida Department of Education, but really engaging in meaningful work that is going to help our staff, our families, and our students make better services and connect resources to our family. Condition 5A, B, and C, you have heard a lot about the 5 conditions, but what does that mean now? What have we changed? What have we improved in our system, and what does that look like at our school level, and how we as the district team is supporting our schools to make this work meaningful? Tammy?
So I mentioned the impact structure a little bit earlier. I talked about the FSAA impact structure. Last year, we started the impact monitoring folder, and so this year we created the impact monitoring structure, which is a step above that, which just means that we created additional data points so that we could make sure that the monitoring of the data by the program managers and the program specialists could be a little bit more detailed, and it's not only about the data, it's about what we do with the data. So the impact structures are in place, and they're listed there, so that the ESC district personnel can assist and support the ESC school-based teams by building capacity and analyzing the school-wide data and the student data in order to guide the decision-making process, and that's actually happening on a monthly basis. So we have the impact allocation structure, and that actually assists us to make sure that we're making good decisions based on the supports that students are receiving. We have the compliance structure that actually makes sure that we're addressing the indicators that we have to monitor with DOE. And then the impact FSAA monitoring structure that also includes the data points for those students that we're monitoring that have moved from FSAA to FSA, and then we're also making sure that students who have any discipline concerns or any social emotional needs, that we're addressing those students as well. So when we look at specifically the FSAA impact structure, the monthly student monitoring data collection points are listed there. The attendance, and we look at grades, we look at discipline incidents, and then we look at interventions and the supports that we currently have in place. And then we also have, we also look at the annual student monitoring. We look at the current GPA, credit checks, graduation plans, diploma options, and then the FSA scores. We just want to make sure that we have the current data, we have the current supports and services in place. Just as we look at that monthly, we look at it annually. We just really want to make sure that we are following up. And so there's a consistent follow-up and monitoring by the problem-solving team. It could be that we're calling an IEP team meeting. It could be a Swiss team that's coming together, care team. It's just a group of members that are coming together to make sure that we're addressing the different components and looking at attendance. We could be looking at grades and making sure that, again, we have the interventions and supports that are in place. And that's, again, monitored at the district level alongside the school-based teams.
That's a lot of things you're doing. Now, some of these things we had been doing before. We're just putting it all in one place and having checklists and all of that, right?
Yes, ma'am. Not
all of this is brand new.
No, ma'am. It's just now in a place that we can monitor the data, and now it's just easily accessible for everyone, and it just makes a little more sense.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Ziegler?
If you don't mind, can I?
Did you have more?
Oh.
Did you have more, or were you finished? No, we're not. Okay. Ms.
Two more
Ziegler.
slides.
Two more slides.
Oh, no, let them finish. Yeah.
Okay. So it takes us to a summary of the East District support. Yes, we have had some systems in place, but what we have done through this process of corrective action is analyze and redesign what we're doing, make it better for our families, more clarity for us, our staff, and definitely helping us design and revamp services for students with disability. We have district personnel to consistently provide support and build capacity with school-based teams. So our teams are assigned. We are designed as professional learning communities. So we work with our school-based teams. Now that we have two program managers are helping Tammy, myself, and the program specialists be at the schools, problem solve, guide those parents, respond to questions, and really look at what do you need and how can I help you. Start building those relationships from the time they come into preschool. And as we walk through, there's different stages. As we go from elementary to middle to high school to post-secondary, there are a lot of questions, and we go through a lot. As parents, we go through a lot of changes, and we have to be mindful that a parent with a student with disability needs that additional time to ask the questions, and we should have the time to be able to respond with clarity and intention. We also have specific regularly scheduled meetings at the schools, so we are intentional in the work that we're doing. We are also working, again, cross departments, collaborating with curriculum as they're coming with the best standards, looking at what are the accommodations, modifications that all our students need, and how we can make that happen. We have set office hours at the district level from the program specialists, so they're readily available to answer questions and guide through any of the processes that are in question. And we often collaborate, and the key here is about building relationships. If we're able to respond to questions, they are going to continue being responsive to problem solved, and that's how we get to design good quality services for our students with disability. We have additional district administrators. We have 2 that have been added to our district to support the work. The last slide that is in front of you is the professional development that we have mapped out for our new assigned ESC APs, our liaisons, our behavior specialists that you have assigned and allocated to our schools. So we are in continuous improvement about collaboration, working together in problem solving to impact the services that we provide for any students. So at this time, we have concluded our presentation.
Thank you. Bridget.
Can I do 5 minutes for each of us? That way we'll be end at 12 o'clock?
Sure.
Okay, because I want to make sure I get through my questions if I can in 5 minutes. I talk fast, so I should be able to. First of all, thank you so much. This is obviously a very important issue to me, and I think many on here. I'm going to focus first on the parental side because I'm very excited about the attendance amount that, as you showed that chart, I think it's evidence of the most recent parent advisory online and in person that there is, in fact, a lot of interest around this. I think it does take time, and I'm going to say something that may not be popular, and it's really more about perception, whether it's reality or not. It is what it is. I do think there is still a fair amount of public concern or mistrust, I can't find the right word. And so perhaps that played a role in the very beginning of them showing up. But I think really as a parent speaking, I can think to myself that they feel like they're on an island by themselves. There's a lot of anxiety around that. There's a lot of personal guilt. When you have peer-to-peer, when they're in a room, they're around a lot of people that are in that same boat. They don't feel like they're by themselves. And I think there's a lot of empowerment and benefit to that I hope, and it sounds like you guys are learning from a lot, that, you know, you guys know this stuff, and this is a foreign language to many of us. So I think that's going to hopefully move forward. I do think that moving ahead is ensuring there's a couple things that, so I hope to see that continue. I know the next one's in November. I believe that in the past, and with COVID, I mean, I don't even, there's just not enough hours in the day. I think everyone in the world can agree with that right now. But if we can try to see it almost be done on a monthly basis so we don't lose that momentum. And I know Dr. Asplund mentioned that we're going to do regional pockets. But I think, again, our parents together will be so beneficial and lean on each other and really work through this. And then you as professionals can really help guide them over the technical things. But I do think there really needs to be an opportunity for them to talk and share, because that building of trust will be absolutely organic at that point, because other people will say something that someone else is also dealing with and not realize, hey, I'm not by myself. So just from outside looking in, participating on that, but I'm very encouraged to see that moving forward. Additionally, I think there's a lot in here, and I tried my darndest to try to read through all of it, but I didn't get through all of it. But so moving to parental permission, one of the biggest issues is obviously that lack of understanding. And so I think you guys highlighted, how do we get ahead of that? And so, and I have to dive in a little bit, and I may do sidebar to understand how this is being delivered. But I believe that it was said that some of these items would be available online. I didn't see them. They could be on our website. I know we're working hard to clean up the clunky website, and that's not a dig at our communications department. You guys are trying to improve it. It has been, there's a lot in there. But if there is something where they can read ahead and access that in a non-vulnerable situation, I think, again, and that it's not 70 pages, but it's a high-level overview, you're probably going to get a lot more insight and in-depth. And people who've already accessed it will all, again, think about those families working together as their own little community. We'll start to share them and forward them to those areas, so that's not someone just automatically searching that out. But going to parental permission, so understanding we're trying to educate our families, but you know, if I really want to make sure we really hit that hard, so that there's all these opportunities for them to learn on their own, or have those online sites. If we do a video, have that in some kind of library, again, where they can do it at their own time in their safe environment, what have you, and then follow up with questions, because they don't know what they don't know. But what happens in the event when you do those parental permissions? My concern is that if they haven't gone on there, great, we have those resources, but if there's a feeling that they don't really understand it, because it is incredibly technical and has absolutely very substantial impacts to the students. I'm watching my time here, I'm running out. But that, what do we do? I just want to make, and you don't have to answer that, I'm just putting this kind of out rhetorically. I think that's really important. So I don't want us to see us a place that we have to see that as an opportunity to make sure that we deepen that opportunity to make them understand. I do have a question of what happens if they don't approve, like they do not approve for their child to be put on access points or in gen ed. So I'll let you answer that question, but I want to get through, that's my question, because I think that's really important. I do think that, I have so many notes, that and the second part is because I understand that they have changed the criteria, and we are waiting for DOE to identify it in writing, so we find ourselves in a very clear and compliant path, even though I know people don't want to hear compliance. But in that time, because I understand it's going to potentially impact a lot of students, I believe you guys have potentially already identified how many they are, do we have a game plan in place so that we're not scrambling when they do respond to us, how we are going to do those transitions, how we're supporting our families, how we're making sure that they are aware in advance, and because that is not a quick flip of the switch, as I know you guys know. So I want to just make sure that those things are being addressed, and I will yield my time because that was 5 minutes. Thank you. So if you want to answer the two major questions I had.
So the first question I'm going to answer. First of all, great recommendations. We are currently having staff work on our website to make it parent-friendly, and I'll link a lot of those resources and information to families so they can have understanding. The second one was on the updated, we're working to have on our desktop of all our teachers a tile. We have shared that before. And that tile is going to link to a lot of the procedures and technical assistant papers, so our staff also is informed on processes and changes that are pertinent to their daily work. And then the second question was? Oh,
it-
so if a parent says no and they do not sign for consent, the IEP team cannot move forward. If the student, for example, the IEP, we have met with the family, we have gone over and reviewed all the data, and parents are not agreeing with that recommendation for an alternative assessment, that student cannot be moved to an alternative assessment. The student remains with accommodations and support design of instruction, but they remain in the general education environment. Sure. Yes, it is. So the new criteria goes back to the beginning of our reevaluation. So we call an IEP team. We have to follow the same process of reconvening an IEP team to open a reevaluation to make sure that all components of those evaluations have been reviewed in order to make informed decisions as we move forward and making sure that student is eligible or not based on the new rule. It's complex. No, not yet, because we're waiting for it. We do have an idea. Again, we're talking about children's life,
No, I know.
families, placement, resources, disabilities overall. So it's not a process that you can switch.
That's exactly
on
my
and on.
concern, yes. And
It
so, and I know you guys
is,
are waiting pending information, so I just,
Us
okay.
too. And we've been waiting since July 1st, and we continue working and asking. But it's not only us, it's the
The
whole,
entire county, yeah.
the
Thank you.
whole state. Yes.
Karen? Rose?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to reiterate Mrs. Ziegler's words for the work that you're doing. Very much appreciated the teamwork and collaboration across departments and connections with school. I'm feeling it and love it. And under Dr. Asplin's leadership, I am confident that we are moving forward in very positive ways for our students and our community. From my individual perspective, and Mrs. Jacqueline, you've heard this before, but I have to say it again, I'm passionate about it. I just want to reaffirm that when we're talking about multi-tiered systems of support for students that haven't been identified as special education, exceptional student education with an individual education plan as of yet, that we are explicitly putting in print what system of support that we would be offering testing. I'm not talking about IQ testing or things that are solely dependent on our psychologist, but academic achievement testing, our capacity for that, cognitive testing that would include how a student learns their strengths, auditory, visual, that we are explicitly offering that to give the highest quality to the system of support that we're moving to next.
Thank you.
I'm not done yet.
Oh.
Thank you.
Oh,
And Mrs. Jacqueline was going to address that, if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't realize you were waiting for, okay.
I was just going to say that, yes, that's very important to our team to really understand the whole child. We have developed what we call the MTSS flow chart, and that is really the guiding work that tells what each team should be doing, how they problem solve at each tier to ensure that when additional information is needed, that parents and families know how to access that information, and our teams can provide the necessary assessments to help guide those interventions.
So it's explicitly in the flow chart then?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I have two more pieces, please, Madam Chair. Second would be, I've heard from a few members, just a few in the community, since that we've been focused in on access points, particularly at Oak Park, and this is truly a question of for us all to be able to learn more. When we look at access points for students with cognitive disabilities, particularly at Oak Park and the level of services that we're providing individual students, and we compare that to life skills, of which there's a perception in the community that we leaned more towards providing life skills courses and curriculum, where does the state stand on that with requirement, and where is our balance in our programs that provide students that have those cognitive needs, life skills, How does it balance with access points? If you could just talk to that, please.
I'm going to start and the team can jump in, but as you know, our students that come with cognitive disabilities have complex issues and executive functioning such as developmental levels. We start building the curriculum, and there are, on the access point curriculum, it scaffolds what teachers should know, what standard they should be teaching to based on the developmental levels at every single stage for the student. So we focus, yes, on the core academics for students with significant cognitive disabilities, but throughout their process of teaching and learning, we evolved and include and integrate social skills, executive skills about functioning in the school environment, generalized skills that they can take it to home. We provide information to parents in those IPT meetings about how to use those skills that we're working on and generalize, because if they continue working at home on those skills, it helps the students when they return to the educational
All
environment.
right, thank you. We do have time limits here, 5 minutes per person, and we need to leave time for, we will have less than 15 minutes left and 3 more people to speak. So Jane Goodwin, if there's time when we're done, we can come back to you. Otherwise, please take them up personally with the individual.
Thank you. I just have a general comment to make. I like what I see. I like the handbook. I think it'll be helpful for me as a resource. I certainly didn't get through the whole thing. I looked at the presentation and I thought, I need to see the presentation first before I go that. But what I want to do is I want to commend you all on this good work, and Dr. Asplin for really being our champion, because I know that you did great work in St. John's. I know that Sonia and others have done great work here. But what I will state is this reorganization that we've had, the added personnel we have of emphasis at the school level, the assistant principal being in charge of this and looking at this more insightfully perhaps than in the past. And I know, based on some of the cases that I have been involved with, some of the students that I have been involved with, sometimes it was pushed off to a person that just didn't have time to get to this today and didn't, there were situations in schools that just were so crammed with activities. The new behaviorists that we've put in, the behavioral therapists and the technicians, I think have made a great deal of difference to us. So I think all of these new personnel that we've added, the new emphasis at the AP level, all of you working with this new model and the training that you've done, I've got great hope and good promise that this will be a great year for us and that our students will be successful in their learning and in their success in their life. I've got some concerns right now with Oak Park, but it certainly isn't around this. It's around COVID. But basically, I think that we are doing a lot of things that give us that added stretch that we didn't have before, because we do have more personnel. We do have more instruction and more technicians and more of those psychologists, therapists, and so forth to work with. And I think that makes a big difference. And I think most of you would know that makes a big difference, because we cut to the bone in a lot of these areas with the recession and just never re-forwarded our thoughts on how important this work was and how we needed to have more people. I know that you all work very, very hard, many, many hours a week, and I thank you for that effort. But I really think that this is great progress, and I think I look forward to this year being a great year for students.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards?
I'll speak quickly. I am new to this entire process, particularly with your team, so I've spent a lot of time just observing and listening and taking my observations and sharing them with Dr. Asplin. And that's pretty much how I've been part of this program. And a couple things. One, That works, Dr. Asplin, because a lot of the information that I've shared with him on assessments I heard today, and particularly in and around all of the things that what came across for me is that this is the information in general, that big book, which I also didn't have a chance to read the whole thing, is parent-centric. And I love that because that is my number one observation. I'll just take it one step further. I know that no one intended to do this, but every time I went to somebody and asked a question, I got inundated with, yes, this is what we do and how we do it and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I know it's because you love the students so much and you care about them, but I was concerned, and that was what I shared with Dr. Asplin, that it wasn't transferring over to the parent. So then I got to listen to the advisory meeting. I'm just going to give this as feedback. I got that notice less than 24 hours, and I had to switch my schedule around to get to it. And I was concerned and have not had a chance, because it's COVID all day, to tell anyone. I was concerned that not enough parents had enough time. I don't know the answer to that, so I'm just throwing it out there. And no judgment, because we're all busy for sure. Lastly, I think that it's important for the community. I'm going to ask this question. I think it's important to, how many students do we have on IEPs total?
Based on survey 3, which is last February enrollment, we had 7,695 students with disability. We had 4,095 students gifted, identified gifted in Sarasota County. And again, that number changes based on enrollment. So we're anticipating a higher number. We have a lot of families that we have welcomed to Sarasota with students with disability, and we're in the process of transitioning IEPs.
Okay, so lastly, I don't know the difference between IEP and then significant cognitive disabilities. Like, where does that line draw? I don't want to take up a whole lot of time, and I want to get to some of you individually so that we can keep this conversation going. And I promise you one question I will ask in preparation so that you can answer. How will you know that this new parent-centric program is really working? What are the benchmarks that you can grab a hold of and say, all of this piece is we're making leaps ahead? So that's a question that I'll get to, and I don't need to cover it for today, but I want to make sure everyone gets their time.
I think one question he asked should be answered, and that was what was the time frame that the parents had notification? We were notified 24 hours, I think, as an afterthought. Somebody said board members might be interested in this. How long did the parents have notification? Was it more than 24 hours?
Oh, yes. The process, like Liz said, started 2 weeks before. Where, Liz, you want to take it over? Because we have a long list where we are using social media or different sources of sending an invitation. We don't want to go too far behind, so we started, I believe, a week and a half before, correct?
Yes, sending out the information, but the process of planning and getting all of the things in place starts earlier,
July.
and then we send it out the 2 weeks before to the families, and multiple ways of notifying, whether it's social media on our Sarasota County school website, flyers that are sent through the schools to the families,
Emails, and we use community engagement to send out. So to the families, we had to secure the list of the families to invite, because it was our first advisory board meeting to start organizing. With some of our parents, we started meeting back in July, organizing and helping. Again, we invited anyone that came and showed concerns at the school board meetings to come and talk to us, listen to us, start, really reframing our practices and what do we need. And based on that, again, back to your meeting, yes, my apologies for sending a late notice to all of you to join our meeting, but we did have to put an RSVP. And it was not that the links were not working on Monday, it was that we needed needed to know in order to do Zoom, you need to structure your meetings. We needed to have secure meetings, but we opened when parents contacted us after the RSVP was closed at 4 p.m. on Monday afternoon. If anyone wanted to join, we hand register them just to get an idea who was coming Zoom, who was coming face-to-face due to COVID.
Good.
We have to structure
All right,
them.
thank you. You had a lot of handouts at that meeting for the people that were there.
Everything
And
was
I'm
sent
trying
out.
to, FINS, Florida, is it Intervention Network?
Florida Inclusion Network
Florida
is
Inclusion.
is one of our partners' discretionary projects. We are the fiscal agent, just like Fiddler's Florida Diagnostic and Resource Center. We are the fiscal agent, so we cover Sarasota, Manatee, and Charlotte. So they are staff that is assigned to Sarasota, are part of our Exceptional Student Education Department to support all our interventions for family, students, and teachers. To make it very clear, we have a parent liaison assigned.
And I'm going to cut you off because.
Yeah, I know you are, but.
I'm going to ask a
yeah.
question, and that is, what is the website? It's fins.org? For FINS, and then it's FINS, and then it's FDDLRS. I just wasn't sure if, well, they can look it up. It's either
It's under
.org.
Fiddlers. It's under the.
Oh,
department-
FINS is under
yes,
Fiddlers also,
yes,
so it's
yes.
FDDLRS.com or org, one or the other.
.com.
And the other thing is to have, any parents that are listening in on this, I ask you to have patience in the next few weeks. We are having a lot of staff out, and I believe 35 yesterday at one of our school that primarily deals with students with disabilities. People are being pulled in from all areas to fill in classrooms and to do this. So somebody who might be the ESE liaison, I'm not sure if the ESE liaison might have been pulled into a first grade class because we can't find substitutes for all of the absentee staff we have right now. Hopefully, we will be peaking. This new wave will be peaking in a few weeks, and we'll get back into that. But there may be employees, staff that are supposed to be working on this or they may be out or they may be pulled in to do something else. So please have patience with us in the next few weeks. Of course, any emergent issues we definitely want to know about. We'll always take care of it. If you think that this child needs something right away, be sure to reach out to us and, well, not us, the school board, your schools. But please have patience with us because we may have to juggle people around and not everyone can get those answers. And with that, do you want to say something? You can hurry up and say because Jen Gordillo is coming on.
Just one final comment. I just wanted to say thank you to our superintendent, to all of you, to DOE, to our parents, to the team, and of course, to all the staff at schools. Because honestly, one, it's an opportunity to embrace continuous improvement, as Stephen Covey said, to sharpen the saw and always get better and be the best that we can be for our students and families. So I just want to say thank you.
And we appreciate you all for all the work you do, and we know how much you care about all of our students. And Dr. Aspen, I'm going to lean it over to you to call on Dr. Gordillo. And Jane, will you handle things for just a second?
All right. I just want to thank our ESE team. Thank you so much for being here and all the work that you've been doing this year and working with the Department of Education as well. I want to thank them. They've been a great partnership and great collaboration. So we'll continue that work and bring another update later on to the board. Yes, we have Dr. Gordillo.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Michael Drennon's on.
Michael Drennon. So, Michael, Dr. Gordillo is going to be able to join us at noon, he said, and he could only be on for a couple of minutes. So I know we want to, when he gets on, we want to talk to him. There's Michael Drennon. I also wanted to give you an update, but I will hold on that until we talk to Dr. Gordillo and Michael Drennon, because I do not want to miss him when he comes on the Zoom.
I'm watching.
So if Jody, if you could come forward, and let's see, also Steve, Brandon, Chris, and Sonia, if you could come back up too, that would be great.
I'll let you know once he's on. I'll let you know when he's on.
Good afternoon, Michael. Thank you for joining us today. I see you on Zoom there.
Hi, Dr. Ashland. Happy to be here. Yeah, and whenever Dr. Gordillo comes on, feel free to, kick me to the side.
All right.
Michael, I have a question. Is there
Yes, ma'am.
any hope that you, as the Department of Health, could ask the governor for more daily data, the kinds of data we got last year, and perhaps the pediatric report that we got weekly? I understand that, and know that we have a lot more pediatric cases, we have a lot more MISC cases. We do not know on a daily basis the number of cases, the number, today's cases, not grouped in with everything since March of 2020. The number of cases, the number of deaths, the number of hospitalizations, that kind of thing. I just don't see that, and I wondered if you, with your bright smiley face, might ask the governor for some help with that. I've been asking other people to write letters. I would ask our parents to write letters to the governor, because we just need that data and we don't have it.
So obviously, my direct communication won't be with the governor's office, but I have contacts at the Bureau of Epidemiology that I could easily ask for updates on that. I believe there's been some discussion about reissuing those daily updates. I just don't know where that is right now or how that's progressing. But I'm happy to send a request to the state.
Is it possible for you to send us a report or show us something, or maybe you've got graphs that show us, but I'd like to know, like perhaps from June 1st to now, or, what are the numbers for the number, the ages of the people, and especially I'd really like to know, the positive rates and the number of people who turned positive that had vaccinations. And then the one I'm really concerned about, we see the numbers in our students in our schools that are positive. And the numbers, in elementary school, I'm surprised that they're leading but of course, they're not vaccinated. But what is the number, or can you look at those numbers are the students that middle and high school, and let's say those from, 12 to 18, how many of them that are now positive were vaccinated versus unvaccinated? Do we have that information?
We do have some of that information, so I could look into that and provide you with some of those numbers. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of lag time just due to the volume of cases that we're currently investigating. And to get vaccine status on all those just takes a little bit of time. It's not naturally reported with the case. So with every case that we get, we would have to look each of those up individually, which we do in most situations, to see their vaccine status. With cases, a new positive, regardless of their vaccine status, is going to have to isolate. But contacts also have to be looked up as well, because it changes their quarantine recommendations if they've been previously vaccinated. Just to give you an idea, talking about numbers, looking at August 1st of this year through the 16th of this year, which was yesterday, there have been 753 reported cases amongst people the age of 5 to 18. And looking at the same time frame last year, I know that's before school started, but looking at the same 16 days from last year, there were 96 cases reported. So just a significant increase in the number of cases that we're following up on this year compared to last year.
Can you
Go ahead, Bridget.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to, can you repeat that one more time? And I just want to know if that was the 14-day, 7-day rolling average. I got the 5 through 18, but I think
Sure.
that's very important. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Sure, so that's not the rolling average, that's just a hard number. So from August 1st to August 16th of this year, 753 cases between the ages of 5 and 18. So 753, and then August 1st to August 16th of last year, 96 cases between the ages of 5 and 18.
And I know that there's been a bump in the last 4 or 5 days from what they were from the 1st to the 10th even. And I would imagine now that we've had a week of school, we will probably see, I'm just guessing, we're going to have higher numbers because we aren't masking or anything at this time. Is there a possibility that you could send us a report daily or weekly on what these numbers are? And not only for our children, but also for the adults in the community, because that's their parents, and oftentimes.
I will need, so if
Or
there's
do you have it on your website that we could get it?
We don't, the local health departments do not generate reports at the local level. Those have, in the past, those were generated at the state level, and we have been asked to refer individuals or requesting data to look at the state's report, which is currently done weekly. Like I said, I'll happily reach out to the state and express the desire to have a daily report. I don't know that I could do that right now without running that through our central office.
All right, but you don't have the reports there. Well, you guys probably know it, but, so.
I have some spreadsheets that I track information on, but I don't generate any local reports that we use internally. I track a lot of things on spreadsheets and can share that information internally. And like when we have meetings like this, I can pull those numbers up and happy to share them in this type of format.
Thank you. Are there any other specific questions to Doc? Is Dr. Gordillo on yet?
No. It's not on yet.
No, okay. Go ahead, Jane.
Well, my question is about hospitalizations of children. I know that our children may be in the hospital here in Sarasota, but they also may be in All Children's in St. Pete, because very often we bypass local hospitals and send our children, our sickest children there. Do you have any documentation on how many children are in hospital in either situation?
Sure. So give you an idea right now, in Sarasota County, there's 325 people who are currently admitted with a diagnosis of COVID. To the best of my knowledge, at this time, none of those are pediatric cases. At All Children's Hospital, there are currently 16 admissions, 9 of which are in the ICU, and none of those are currently Sarasota residents. Those are current numbers. I can't look back in time to see what it's been over, if someone's been admitted and discharged. That's just what the numbers are right now.
Thank
so
you.
The best of my knowledge right now, none from Sarasota admitted. However, there are some from other counties at All Children's.
Mr. Edwards.
Hello.
Just briefly on those numbers that you shared with us, can we get those numbers to Mr. Dumas and his team on a daily basis and have that posted somewhere? Because I want to make sure I have an overall view of positivity rates in Sarasota County. I'm specifically looking for the numbers that we just heard on a daily basis for school-aged children in both hospitals.
We get daily reports for Sarasota County. No, not Sarasota County, but students in our schools.
Right,
You're
but
looking
not all
for
students
All
are
right, so
in
you
our
are looking
schools.
for the
That's what
whole
I'm trying
county,
to
not
get
just
to.
our-
Thank
that's
you,
what I wanted
Mrs.
to
Brown. That's
clarify.
what I'm trying to get to, is
Right.
that I just need to, I want a snapshot of Sarasota County.
Yep.
And I want to reiterate, and I appreciate the position you may or may not be in because of what you're allowed to report and not allowed, but you just gave numbers that I would love to see and hear every single day for Sarasota County.
Yeah,
So that's just my feedback.
I can provide those numbers to Jody. That shouldn't be an issue.
Bridget?
Thank you. Michael, thank you so much. I know you guys are slammed, so I appreciate the work that you are continually doing. And I agree with the reporting, and I know you guys are limited on top of the many other things you're doing, and so I will join in the effort to see if we can get those reports. They are very helpful. They're helpful to communicate to the community, because without that data, it makes it any more speculatory. So not that what we want to add more to your plate, but I will certainly join that to ask that the state allows such things to be reported at the county level. But moving forward, to be consistent, I know you jumped into this, and I appreciate it, but I have about 4 or 5 questions. And so just starting with the stats where we're at, can you give us, for Sarasota County, where we're at for the 7-day, the 16-day, and if you have the breakdown from 18 and below to above, that would be great. But I know that's where we kind of start. And then talking through hospitalizations, you kind of gave an overview of that, so we can probably skip that waiting for Dr. Gordillo. But if you don't mind, could you give us where we're at right now?
Sure. So you want to know
positivity
I can tell
rate?
you overall percent positivity. I'm going to, pardon me as I look off the camera at my spreadsheet. So for the day, currently today, actually these numbers are for yesterday, percent positivity is 14.41 for Sarasota County. And for 14 days, or you asked for 7 days and 14 days. I'll give you all of them. So that's for a single day today. 7 days, it's 14.69. And for 14 days, it's 14.03.
Okay.
If we look at, I don't have percent positivity for individuals 5 to 18, but I can tell you that yesterday, there were 62 persons aged 5 to 18 reported as cases, and the 7-day average is 51.57. So that means if we look at each day for a 7-day period, we're averaging right at 52 cases a day amongst those 5 to 18.
Okay, and then I don't know, and again, because I know Dr. Gordillo has an immense task in front of him, so I don't know how long he'll be here. When it comes to hospitalizations, I know that Sarasota County or SMH does not have a pediatric ICU, and that's to Mrs. Goodwin's point that a lot of those go to all children's. Do you have, or does the Department of Health have any kind of track record of COVID submissions? And again, and I'm not diminishing anything, but there is a reality too. If someone goes to the hospital because of complications from COVID, or they are admitted to the hospital for other complications and subsequently test positive for COVID. Do you have any indication of that? And I think that's it would be very valid information to a certain degree, just as we talk to the public.
So my understanding at this time is that number, the 325, and that's not all at SMH, that's in the entire county, so it includes our 3 other hospitals.
Okay.
The 325 is individuals who are admitted because of COVID.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Now that number, the number may be different if you look at people who've tested positive after being admitted, but those are individuals admitted because of COVID.
The primary reason being COVID. Perfect. Thank you. And then finally,
Yes, ma'am.
one of the questions on the contact tracing, and I understand that given the Delta variant being highly transmissible, with even those who have been vaccinated, fully vaccinated, it's my understanding that while there are some breakthrough cases, the good news is that the vaccine is supposedly working as well as it can be to keep them out from severe illness or mortality. However, my question is from a shedding ability. My understanding is that even those who've been fully vaccinated who do come in contact with COVID and are tested positive can still shed the virus. And it's about 5 days, if you will, for their viral load to be on a peak, and then it kind of stops, and that keeps them from getting very sick. Is that accurate? I'm not a doctor, and I don't want to do Google Doctor where I read online, so I just want to verify some of that information.
Sure, so I'll clarify, I'm not a doctor either. So yes, to give you an idea, right now it's about 90% of those that are hospitalized are unvaccinated. And so that's one of the reasons why the statement is made that the vaccine appears to be very effective at preventing severe illness, knowing that there are quite a few people vaccinated, obviously not as many as we'd like to see, but quite a few people that are vaccinated. We know breakthrough cases do occur. The vast majority of them don't require hospitalizations. I'm aware of some recent research that does show that individuals who've been vaccinated and subsequently test positive do shed that virus and can infect others. I don't know the daily time frame. I'd have to do some more reading to find that. I don't know if it's, I would assume which is very dangerous, that it's very similar to a person who is unvaccinated. I don't know why that would be different, but I can't speak to that. I'd have to do some reading, a little bit more research on a time frame for when they shed that.
And the reason I asked that question is contact tracing, not that I want to see further disruption, but if we're going to do something, we want to do it fully effective across the board. And I know we're totally from a capacity standpoint of making those calls, but at the end of the day, even if we have, from the school setting, even if we identify who the close contacts are, if they're vaccinated, we typically do not talk to them about them being a close contact, and those who have been vaccinated aren't necessarily aware that they have been identified as a close contact and continue on as business as usual. My only concern with that, again, I do not want to have further disruption, but again, I believe it's important because I think a lot of the general public read a lot of the same things and see that, and so if we're going to do it all the way, we want to do it right, we want to do it all the way right. And so with that, because that undermines trust of whatever the functions that we're trying to do. So I just wanted to verify. So those who are vaccinated could still shed the virus. Their own benefit is that they will not likely get very severely ill, but they could hypothetically pass it along to anyone in the school if they're coming back and they're not identified as being a close contact, because they won't get tested if they don't know that they're a close contact. Is that accurate?
So one of the recommendations we do have is someone's identified as a close contact. Now, if they're a close contact and vaccinated, then they wouldn't have to be tested based on the current guidance that we have from the Surgeon General. However, all those other contacts would need to test to return. If we look at separate from the Surgeon General's emergency rule, anyone who has been vaccinated and has subsequently been exposed should be tested, just because the possibility of breakthrough does exist.
So just for one more time.
That guidance is not in the Surgeon General's order.
And which one? So for clarification, because I think, and I know you don't write these rules, and that's, bear with me. If there is someone in our school that is identified as a close contact, whether it be staff or students, if they are vaccinated, they aren't necessarily identified as that they've been a close contact, and this is everywhere, I guess, even Department of Health outside of schools.
Right.
Yet they still have the potential to shed that virus to others. They, themselves as being fully vaccinated, likely are not going to get very ill, but they can still transmit COVID-19.
If they do become infected, that's correct. There's a potential they still could spread it.
And again, I know you don't write the rules, so this is kind of a hypothetical or kind of rhetorical, but do you see how that can be somewhat challenging, as if we are trying to contain the spread, we aren't notifying people who are close contacts who are vaccinated, even though they could potentially spread that virus?
So, I mean, we could definitely provide them with the same letter that we provide all contacts, just the volume of cases and contacts that we do have. That's one of the reasons why we prioritize those that have been unvaccinated.
No, and I understand that, and so I appreciate that, and that's not to diminish the role that you and our team here are doing a tremendous job, and it's probably already past this point of unmanageable. But from a knowledge standpoint, again, because what I see from the public standpoint, it's very frustrating, I'm sure for you guys too, is there's an erosion of trust where it's like, wait, this doesn't make sense. It's kind of, if this happens, then you can do this. It doesn't seem like we're doing it all the way. So I just want to make sure I just fully understand it. And again, if it's really that it's just fully unmanageable because we're at thousands and thousands of numbers, that just needs to be said so people can be more aware that their guard needs to be up, even if they are vaccinated. That, I guess, is the intention of my question. Thank you so much again for everything you're doing.
Dr. Drennon, do you have any idea, I mean, because I know we're saying, we're saying all these people that we know that are vaccinated are now getting it, but in the big picture, is there anything about what's the percentage of people who are vaccinated that are getting breakthroughs? I mean, is that like 10%, 20%, 25%? I mean, how many people have been vaccinated but are still getting it as a percent of all people that are vaccinated? I mean, I was hearing it was, like 1 or 2%, but that was a while ago.
So our best estimate at this time is it's somewhere going to be between 8 and 10% of those people that are fully vaccinated have a breakthrough case. Obviously, as we move forward and collect more information, those numbers may change more or less. But that right now, if we look at the numbers, it's somewhere between 8 and 10%.
Thank you. Jane?
I just read in the Sun Sentinel that it was 11%, so I guess that's pretty close to the number that you had said, Michael. But my question, when we look at all and we talk about all these things, breakthroughs or whatever, or people that maybe are carrying it and are asymptomatic, is there any testing protocol that we could do at schools? I've talked to the superintendent about this. Is there any testing protocols that we could do at schools? Now, the PCR test takes too long, it's too expensive, but there are quick tests, with both saliva quick tests and nasal quick tests, that can give you a pretty good idea where the contagion is. And this pandemic, we have been going blind through this whole time of not doing testing. And why is it that we haven't looked at testing protocols? Because I think this would be a really a great way for us to find out what's really going on with our school population.
Sure. So the value in the PCR test is that it is very effective at picking up when a person is infected, even if they are asymptomatic, so they don't currently present with any symptoms.
Okay.
Unfortunately, with the antigen test, it is not as effective at identifying someone who's a case if they're asymptomatic. So they could be currently incubating the disease, have the disease and be asymptomatic, or early on in their infectious period, and just haven't developed symptoms yet. And so if you use something like the antigen test across the board, there's still the possibility you would miss people who are positive just because you catch them at the wrong window. Are you going to catch some that are positive? Yes, you will. But it's not, it's not going to be 100% effective at identifying all cases in the school setting.
I had heard that it was like 95% effective. Is it that high?
It's very effective if the person has symptoms.
Okay.
That decreases in people who don't have symptoms.
I would say that perhaps the antigen test and the at-home test might even be less effective. It's sort of like those quick tests, those pregnancy tests. You pretty much can count on a positive result,
That works pretty well.
but the negative result you might need to retest for. I mean, you
Sure, so
probably
that's the
haven't had a
limitation with,
pregnancy test.
the home antigen test is extremely similar to and in some situations, it's the exact same test. The Binax now is one of the more popular ones. It is something that's used at many test sites and then can also be purchased and used at home. And yes, you were right. Very, very good at identifying a positive. But if someone's asymptomatic or early in their infectious period or incubation period, it may not identify them.
And the incubation period, I understand for this Delta virus is usually, normally they were saying, it could come between 4 and 7 days, but I hear the Delta virus comes quicker.
So the incubation period originally, if you want to call it alpha or the UK variant, was somewhere between 2 and 14 days. Average was about 7. Seems to be with the Delta, it's somewhere between 2 and 10 and average about 5.
So if somebody has a child that's quarantined and run and gets a test the next day, that won't necessarily give them what they need to know.
That is correct. We would recommend anyone looking to get tested after an exposure wait at least 4 days. So would test on the 5th day and preferably a PCR test because it's going to be more apt to pick up someone who's asymptomatic. Like I said before, the antigen test this is not as good as picking up asymptomatic cases.
Now, the antigen test is one that you can get through the drive-through at most drugstores now, and you'll get the results quickly, but the PCR usually takes longer? Or are they giving the PCR test at the drugstores?
The PCR test is the one that you're typically going to take at least 24-hour period. There are some rapid PCRs. I do not know how available they are in the community. That's probably going to get you maybe a same-day result, but they are not as common as the traditional
They're
PCR.
probably expensive, too.
There is a cost associated with those, yes.
Now, we have sites that we're working with you, just like we did last year, for staff, students, and family members to get tested still. What do they have to do to get in those sites?
And so we're
What
asking that
times
they
are they
call and
open?
make an appointment.
There's a phone number to call to make an appointment?
That's correct. We're looking to increase the number of staff that we have at those locations, just because we know we're starting to see an increased demand, just based on the numbers that we have currently.
Okay, so those people who might be watching now, what is that phone number and what hours are those open and where are they? Or can Jody tell us this?
I can't tell you offhand, but it's on our website, and it's we've passed it out numbers of times, so we'll just make sure.
So it's on the COVID website?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And they can make an appointment with a phone call?
Yes, absolutely.
Bridget, are you here for, again, or?
Want to make,
Okay.
I don't, okay, I'll just leave it on. If any other board members, I had a follow-up question. Am I recognized?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I don't know if Dr. Gordillo, again, I recognize they have a serious primary job, so I don't know if he's going to be able to join us. And so with that, Michael, I get to ask you some of the medical questions that I recognize, but one of my questions was really about what I oftentimes don't hear anyone talk about is, in the event you're tested positive, what treatments are out there for people who do test positive, to mitigate the severity of their illness beyond vaccination so that they don't end up in the hospital. I know the governor came out with the anoclonal antibodies, but I believe that's more geared, hopefully because of the availability is more towards higher risk. But can you speak to that? Because I feel like that discussion has been very absent over the last year and a half, and when we have millions of people who have tested positive. So is there anything that you can shed a light on for that aspect?
I think just a small amount. I think definitely Dr. Gordillo would be the better person to answer that, or our medical provider in general, not being a physician.
Mm-hmm.
So vaccines, we use those to prevent becoming infected. Blue's definitely not effective in a treatment regimen. Once someone becomes infected, the vaccine's not going to help change their symptoms. Obviously, we'd still recommend someone get vaccinated once they completely recover from their initial infection, just because of a boost to antibodies, but not going to be used from a treatment standpoint. The governor did announce that, and it was discussed also, I believe, by the Surgeon General, that we have a certain amount of the monoclonal antibody that can be used in different situations, can be used for people who have been exposed to reduce the occurrence of infection, and then also as a form of treatment. As it relates to other treatment regimens, I just can't speak to that because that's not something that that we're tasked with doing.
Totally, and that's fair. And then I guess the advice would be speak with your medical provider. So finally,
Sure.
the comparison to Alpha, I mean the original COVID, if you will, the OG, or to the Delta variant, is that, and I don't have the numbers unless you do, the increase of transmissibility, because one of the major topics, as you are very aware of, is the masks discussion that we will have to talk through. And so but as we evaluate it, the level of transmissibility is a very important component of that policy decision because of the effectiveness or lack thereof of, for example, what I see 99% of our students at least use are single layer cloth masks. Can you speak to the increase in transmissibility of the Delta variant?
Sure. So I believe with the original variant that we were looking at, one person would have potentially infect 3 other individuals. And with the Delta variant, that's somewhere between 5 and 6. So one person then has the opportunity to infect essentially twice as many people as the original or Alpha variant. To your point, yes, masks should be 2-ply cloth masks in most situations, although I know some people wear the paper surgical masks. One thing that's important to remember is the masks, essentially, as it's stated by the CDC, the intent of these masks is not necessarily to protect the wearer from becoming infected. It's to reduce the ability of the wearer from spreading it to others. Obviously, some benefit to the wearer, but its main goal is to reduce those droplets when someone coughs, sneezes, speaks, or sings, things like that. Keep those closer to the person who is infected and reduce their ability to spread it to others would be the primary goal of masks.
And if an individual wore a mask and a face shield, because I think the face shield we talked about a year ago this time, which unfortunately we are having this conversation again, was such that also the face shield is such that it protects the wearer more in a more significant way. Obviously not more than a mask. For others, can you speak to that?
So the mask is going to be that first recommendation, and then any additional barrier that's kind of put in there. So that would be the intent of a face shield. It's going to reduce the potential of those droplets to land on a person. Would be the goal of that face mask, or the face shield. I'm sorry.
Thank you again.
We're talking about the number of breakthrough vaccinations and all of that. Can you tell us, and I'm not asking you to say it off the top of your head, you probably got lots of numbers up there, if 90% are unvaccinated, 10% are breakthrough cases, and you're saying that it's 10% or something of those vaccinated people end up in a hospital or get breakthrough cases at any level, can you tell us what the total number is of vaccinated people in Sarasota versus the number of breakthrough cases? And I don't expect you to have that at your fingers, but maybe, in your spare time, you could look at that.
I can tell you the number of vaccinated people in Sarasota. I don't have off the top of my head or easily the number of breakthrough cases. So to give you an idea, in Sarasota, and this is a couple days old. This isn't as of yesterday. So individuals having received at least one dose would be 286,659. So those people have received at least one dose. That's about 66% of our population. Individuals who've completed the vaccine series, so they either received 2 doses of Pfizer or Moderna or the 1 dose of the Johnson & Johnson, is 244,722, and that's right at 56% of the population.
Do you have that broken down by?
If we look at 12 to 19-year-olds,
yeah.
And I am sorry, I don't have a way to look at only 12 to 18. We look at 12 to 19-year-olds, those who've received 1 dose is 13,016, which is approximately 44% of that population in Sarasota. And of those that have completed the series, and so that would be someone who's received, well, the 19-year-olds could have received any of the vaccines, but the 12 to 18-year-olds would only have received the Pfizer vaccine. That's going to be 9,058, which is approximately 30% of that population.
Have you seen an increase in that population getting vaccines in the last week or two?
Overall, we've seen a slight increase in the demand for the vaccine. I can't speak to specifically that 12 to 19-year-old age group,
okay.
But overall, we've seen a slight increase in requests for vaccines.
Thank you. Tom?
I do have a
Yeah, put your...
Sorry, I do have a medical question. Have we heard from Dr. Gordillo?
He's trying to get on now.
Okay,
and
great.
we're
Then I'll wait. No offense, Michael.
No, none taken.
Jane, do you have a question for?
Jane, we can't hear you.
We talked about special drugs for adults, but for children, the majority of treatments really are more palliative in nature. Am I correct in saying that?
You'd have to ask. I think that's a better question for Dr. Gordillo to answer. I apologize.
Bridget, you have another question for Dr. Drennon?
He is on.
I'll wait.
Dr. Gordillo. Dr. Gordillo, can you hear us?
Re-key if you want to talk to Gordillo.
I can hear you now.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Our board is meeting today, and I know we have a few questions.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any. Thank you for having me.
Could you give us the general, I mean, we've read in the paper, but not everybody out there reads the paper, what the general status is of COVID at your hospital and what you've seen? I've heard you're breaking more records.
Well, today we broke a new record. We have 240 patients. 50-something are in the ICU. The majority of them are on ventilators. So this is yesterday, today probably was the worst day of the pandemic so far. It's extremely pressured. Everybody is under stress. The hospital is doing what they can to manage the operations. It's extremely difficult. Staff is very resilient, but it's also exhausted and tired. So it's a very, very dire, difficult situation. I wouldn't say catastrophic, but it's as worse as it has been in the last 18 months.
Now, you don't have any, I don't think you have any, I think there might have been a 17-year-old inpatient with COVID, but, we're looking at children, and of course we care about staff too, but, and the kids' parents, but the children, you don't have them in there, but do you see them in the ER?
I do not. I don't.
Well, not you, but does the hospital?
I go to the emergency room to see patients that get admitted. So I don't know what they do in the outpatient arena in the emergency room. I know that they see children. Children don't get admitted to the hospital. I don't know the exact numbers of, I know there's been hospitalized children as young as days old, and you mentioned somebody that was 17. So we do see the full spectrum of children aged days to 17-year-olds in the hospital. But what has happened in children admissions, at least in Sarasota Memorial, doesn't pales in comparison with what happens in adults. Traditionally, those children that have complicated problems get referred to All Children Hospital in St. Pete. So that it's where the most complicated cases go. The 17-year-old actually went the other way, went from All Children's to here and had complications that led to intensive care. But that's kind of a little bit unusual to go that way.
What advice do you have for parents?
Well, the parents, they are going to have a very difficult time this year. They already having it, not only even before school started. So my advice for parents is to heed the public health advice. The public health have been recommending masks, distancing, avoiding crowds, all the non-pharmacologic interventions that we recommended before. The advent of vaccines, because of this new strain and because of this new variant, we need to go back and pull out all the mitigation measures that we used to use before, need to be used now. We are at the worst of the pandemic in Florida. We're at the worst of the pandemic in Sarasota. And we need your help. And I know it's very hard to be asking you. You've been sacrificing so much, and you continue to do so. But it's the only way that we can get out of this crisis. It is a public health crisis, and this calls for this type of measures.
So you call it a crisis. What's the difference between the COVID and the Delta?
So Delta is just it's COVID.
It's more aggressive.
There are a variety of variants that this virus has. The variant that occurred in Wuhan, we call it the ancestral strain. That only predominantly in the world for about 3 months. Then it changed to something else, and then this was taken over by the Alpha variant probably at the end of last year through the beginning of this year, and then starting in April was taken over by this new Delta strain. So what's been happening is that the virus becomes fitter by mutations, and as it becomes more fit, this virus is learning to become more transmissible. So that's what happened, when we transitioned from Alpha to Delta, the virus gained twice as much ability to transmit. So now we're dealing with a virus that's very different in terms of contagiousness, of transmissibility, than the one that originated in China at the beginning of last year. So now in terms of transmissibility, we're dealing with a virus that is almost the same as chickenpox, as contagious as chickenpox. So that's what we're dealing with now.
So it's as transmissible as chickenpox. It's nothing like chickenpox as an illness, though, right? It's just transmissibility. Is that easy?
Yes, exactly.
But it's more aggressive, and I guess we're seeing more in the hospital and more in the ICU. We keep breaking those records. Those are not the records you want to break. Mr. Edwards, you have questions from Dr. Gordillo?
Yes, thanks for being here, and also thank Dr. Fiorica. I know you guys have been busy. I've been trying to find some numbers, and you guys have just been incredibly available when everybody in the world is calling you and asking you for the same numbers. So I appreciate you being here. I have 2 quick questions. We have, obviously, this ever-ending mask conversation, and I have a question about masks. It comes across in many cases being said that it's a medical decision and a medical procedure or some sort of medical evaluation to wear or not wear a mask. My understanding is that it's a form of mitigation, a form of social distance, another form of mitigation such as social distancing, hand washing, so forth and so on. It's not a prevention. It's just in addition to all of the things that we're trying to do to keep kids safe and in classrooms. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. There's nothing magic with masks. There's nothing medical. It's just like you said, it's one of the multiple tools that we have to mitigate the transmission of this virus that has become so much more transmissible.
Thank you. My second question is, and I ask because of your specialty. If you could look into the future for a second, all the data I understand is that children are not as affected as adults and that their cases are milder, but we're certainly not trying to play Russian roulette with young people by any stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, if we're looking at children that are under the age of 12 who have absolutely no chance of being vaccinated, to the best of my understanding, for the next 90 days, isn't that a hotbed for the variant, as you've described, who's trying to make itself more contagious? Isn't that really a hotbed for where more mutations and more problems can happen from the variant? Isn't that still a continued form of Russian roulette?
Yes, so viruses mutate when they replicate, when they reproduce. So viruses, when they reproduce, they make errors in their replication. And the errors may be random, but we think there's probably not randomness. There is a certain order on this because what we see is these strains tend to develop those mutations in places where they favor something, either favor transmission or favor evasion from vaccine or favor evasion from the attack of our immune system. So that's just a natural, this is evolution that we're seeing in real time. Normally for people, when they study evolution, we study it for over millions, millennia, and things like that. When it comes to virus, now we have the ability, because of the progress in molecular biology, we can study that real time. So this is the first time that we're looking at this phenomenon, and it's just incredible how it happens. So each replication, it can lead to a mutation. Most mutations don't make any changes, but as you have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, 100,000s of people getting infected, remember the replications that occur for this virus are many millions of times in one host. So all these mutations occur very frequently, and you select the ones that are most important for the virus, and the virus tend to keep the ones that make them better in transmission. So if you look at the mutations themselves, they've been cataloged. And Delta, for example, has certain mutations that they have found that it makes more make it easier to attach to the cells and to inject the RNA contents into the cells. So, very subtle changes make the virus better in infecting a human cell. And this is what happens when we give the virus opportunity to replicate. So yes, to answer your question, if there is more replication, not only in children, but across the world, as there is unvaccinated populations, the virus will have more chances of replicating. Just keep in mind that a vaccinated person is estimated to be about 1/8 as resistant to infection to the virus that somebody that is not vaccinated. So, if the virus finds populations that are not vaccinated, obviously it's easier to infect them, and there will be more replication, which will inevitably, in time, will lead to more mutations and new variants emerging. So, yeah, it will give the opportunity to the virus to do what you described.
Thank you so much for those answers. They're very helpful.
Bridget.
Dr. Gordillo, thank you so much for being here, for everything you and your team are doing. I know that the words you stated at the beginning are true and heartfelt, and again, with all the things that are going on, I appreciate the time on this important discussion. One thing that I want to go back to, and trying to be consistent throughout the beginning of this pandemic when we knew nothing. One of the most important things that we were all told as we learned more was that we cannot overrun our hospitals because the ripple effect to so many is pretty vast and exponential. Can you give us a sense, and it's not just hospital beds, but it's also your staff, the staff at the hospital is being overworked and it plays a toll. Can you give us a sense of where you guys are at, and even just from a capacity standpoint and just the ability to sustain as we go forward with the potential increase?
Yeah, that's a very important point, and cannot be underscored enough. Like Sarasota Memorial it's a large hospital, probably has enough beds to expand into areas that even if we worsen from where we are, we can probably handle that to a certain point, obviously, as opposed to other hospitals in other places. But the problem that we have is the staffing. The staffing it's been under stress for a long time. Doesn't have a lot of expansion capacity. In the past, we could go and get traveler nurses, for example, or hire other staff to augment what we have. But now everybody is in the same boat, so to speak, and the pool that we can draw from is non-existent. So everybody's looking at the same resources, so it's extremely difficult to find other staff to help us out. So now we're improvising. Now we're looking at using nurses that, for example, in the ICU, we need more nurses, so we get nurses from areas that are not being utilized. You know, we're cutting down on surgical services, for example. So we're using nurses from the operative areas, of the surgical areas. We take them to the ICU to assist the ICU nurses. And we're doing those type of things throughout the hospital. The same thing with the doctors. You know, the probably the most stressed doctors in the hospital are the intensive care doctors, the infectious diseases doctor, and the emergency room doctors. So all of us need help. So the intensivists are getting help from surgeons, they're getting help from other parts of the hospital, doctors that are not as busy. But, you know, whenever you improvise, you know, it's not the same to have the same professionals that take care of those patients every day. So we're looking for creative ways to deal with these problems. But, you know, if we continue in this unmitigated growth, we're going to get into more and more difficulties and less optimal care, which is something that at Sarasota Memorial and at most hospitals in the United States, we've been proud of to do that. But as the system is stressed, yeah, we're going to get into those type of issues.
Thank you so much. And I think that's really important and something you highlighted. I mean, we were facing this, and we'll probably talk to this soon about, as we contact trace, we're having a very similar dire situation from staffing standpoint. But when we talk about the health crisis that we are facing and the standard of care when you're overworked, it is a ripple effect. And I think that's really important that the community understand that. And as such, as we consider mitigating factors, masks being one of them, social distancing, cleaning, et cetera, staying home when you're sick, not taking Tylenol, going to school, all those things. There was another element that I mentioned to Mr. Drennon, and I understand he's not a doctor, and I know that this is probably going to be limited to you to share because it depends on the patient. But what I have found is that I haven't seen as many discussions about when someone does test positive, different kind of treatments that will keep them out of the hospital, again, as another element of mitigation. Can you speak to that at all, or are you aware of any of any treatments that have been illustrated to be effective beyond just hunkering down and taking Tylenol, I think is a lot of times what we would hear. But are there other elements that we can start to, or not us, but that can be communicated to the community to help them stay away from the hospital and weather the storm? Did that make sense?
I can answer that if Michael doesn't want to.
Oh, no, I already asked him. No, that's for you. Take it away.
Okay. Yeah, so in terms of treatment that are available for outpatients, the only one that have been proven to be effective is the Regeneron monoclonal antibody against the spike protein, which is 2 antibodies against parts of this spike protein. And fortunately, last year, during the midst of the pandemic, we were the hospital, the number 2 hospital in the country recruiting patients for these studies. There were 3 studies that we did at the time, 1 for inpatients, 1 for outpatients, and 1 for prevention on household contacts. The inpatient study didn't work. Patients presented too late for that, and when this medication is given too late, it doesn't work. But it did show efficacy in the other 2 categories. And the one that was proven the earliest to be effective was the infusion of the monoclonal antibody for patients that have been diagnosed with COVID, especially early on within this first 10 days, and especially within the first 7 days, where it shows that it decreases the hospitalization rate by about 66%. So this led to FDA approval, and not approval, emergency use authorization. I believe it was around March or April. So we've had that drug at Sarasota Memorial since about April, and we've been infusing that since then to whoever qualifies since about April. There was low, even though we were advertising and telling all the doctors that it is available, there was not a whole lot of demand. I'm not sure why there wasn't a lot of acceptance among the physicians. In Sarasota, maybe just lack of awareness. Who knows what the exact reasons were, but in the last month, we've seen a tremendous increase in the demand for this. So we're overwhelmed right now with demands. We probably screen about 70 cases a day. You ask for children, the emergency use authorization goes down to 12 years old. But because before this onset, this onslaught in this sharp rise in the request for treatments, we were focusing on the adults. So we set up this clinic for adults for 18 and over because All Children Hospital, which is our provider basically for advanced therapies in children, had their own clinic. So children were going over there. So now we have to go back to the drawing board. Can we make this therapy available for children? The problem is that we are booked 4 days in advance, and as I said, this treatment is given early. So I think right now we are overwhelmed. And even if we open up for children, there may not be any opportunities for children to get this because it's just the demand is so high right now.
Thank you for that.
So that's proven therapy for outpatients, and the rest is basically supportive care.
Okay, thank you so much. I have one final question, and I know my other members probably do, but one of the other areas, particularly as we look at our pediatric cases that are hospitalized is, and even over that, not just pediatric, is, and I know it's been talked about a lot, is the comorbidities play a very significant role of their ability to combat COVID-19 if they become infected. Is that still the case that you're seeing, or because I read reports that they say that what otherwise healthy individuals are now being hospitalized, whereas at the beginning that obviously there were comorbidities, obesity, diabetes, a number of other ones that I can't probably think of to list off, that you guys were seeing being hospitalized. Has that changed now that with the Delta variant, that we're seeing people without those comorbidities be still hospitalized?
No, I think largely the people that get admitted to the hospital, and this goes to adults and children, they have comorbidities. There may not be the catastrophic comorbidities, but yeah, they have some, a large portion of the population have asthma, and they have diabetes, and they have obesity. And so that, the people with comorbidities in the population at large probably are 50-60% of the population.
Okay. Thank you again for everything. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have a question we're going to be having to answer here. We currently have a mask optional policy, and in order to change that, we have to in order to have it effective at any time while we're still having this, we have to call an emergency meeting. You used the word crisis before. Do you think that the numbers justify the board taking emergency action to change an optional use mask policy?
Absolutely, yes.
And what is your opinion of allowing parents to opt out, not for medical reasons, just for personal reasons, or they'll say, that, the mask made my kid sick. My child had colds all last year, and it was because of the mask, or they're getting acne, and it's because of the mask. What do we say to those parents?
Yeah, I think during the crisis, I think we all need to make sacrifices. Yeah, if your child gets some of those symptoms, I think it's worthwhile some sacrifice to get us out of the hole. Once we get the numbers under control, we can relax those measures. But I just must say a little bit on this is that, remember last year during the winter season, we did not have any of the other viruses circulating that normally hit schools very badly. RSV, parainfluenza, influenza. And this largely is because of the non-pharmacologic interventions that we instituted last year, all the measures that you described. So all these things are there waiting to happen in the winter. So I just think you need to consider that, how is the school going to operate once, if we don't have these measures? Right now, I'm not saying that we should do this because of this being in the horizon, but I think we must move with masks because of the current acute crisis. We don't know how this acute crisis is going to last. Nobody can predict it. If you look at the predictions from the various places that are listed in the CDC, looks like a hurricane spaghetti model. They're all over the place. So we don't know how long we're going to be in this crisis. Hopefully we won't be too long, but it is unpredictable. But even then, if we move past this, let's say the COVID starts going down, pretty soon we're going to start having influenza and parainfluenza and all the other viruses that you're familiar with. And it's going to be extremely difficult to manage because we're not going to be able to tell which kid has which virus, which will lead to a lot of absenteeism in Michael Drennon and his team in the health department, and you guys are going to have a very hard time in dealing with this. And this is obviously has a lot of collateral damage and collateral effects. It affects us in the hospital when our staff has to be called to go pick up their children. And sometimes they don't have who to leave those children with. So our staff is already stressed. And then on top of that, they cannot come to work because they have to take care of their children. So indirectly, it affects us. And I'm sure it affects you also in your operations at the school level. The hospital and the school, Sarasota school system being the largest employees here, I'm sure they will feel all these effects directly or indirectly.
So should we allow then, and I would imagine there would be 20, 30% people that would say, I want to opt out, for whatever reason, should we allow that, or should we allow, or say, well, if you've had a vaccine, you don't have to wear a mask? I mean, in those two situations, what would you recommend in there?
Right now, during the acute crisis, the acute medical hospital crisis that we are dealing with right now, I would say I would not allow opt-outs. Once that medical crisis is alleviated, then we can have a conversation about that. But at the current time, I would be in favor of not allowing opt-outs.
Including persons who are vaccinated?
Yes.
Thank you. I have Dr. Asplin.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to let you know, I was just going to speak to some of our operations once Dr. Gordillo is on his way.
Right. I think we need that. We need our staff. So I think we're done with questions from Dr. Gordillo. And we really, really appreciate giving us your time, because we know how stressed you are and how much you have to do there. And, don't break any more records if you can.
Yeah, thank you for having me. But, I think there is nothing more important for society than keep the kids going to school. So, I think Dr. Eureka and David Berender and the whole hospital staff have been very, very supportive and want that everybody wants the school system to succeed. But we are in a symbiotic relationship. We must assist each other.
Yeah, and you know, we need to know what the numbers are, and we need to know what the medical advice is before we make these decisions. And thank you so much for sharing that, your expertise.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Gordillo and Mr. Drennon. Really appreciate your time today. Just wanted to give you an update from the school system standpoint. You know, I know we've heard about numbers, we've heard from our doctors and so forth, but you know, what's going on in the school system and what does that look like, especially in the area of operations? And I know that over the last week or so, we've definitely received many emails, and I know you have too, and many strong opinions on both sides of the mask issue as well. But that aside, I want to make sure that everyone understands that, you know, our top priority is creating a safe environment for our students and our employees. That's number one, providing that safe environment, and that's what we intend to do. Now, you know, this year we have more students in our seats. You know, we don't have the remote option, and more students are face-to-face, which is an outstanding thing. And then also, we've had many students move in from other states and other areas, and so we've had some tremendous growth. And with that, we have mitigation, and I want to talk to that, but also this spike. You know, this spike over the last week or 2 weeks, you know, a month ago, we're talking about, you know, optional mask policy. Everything's good. We're moving along. We're talking more about instruction, which is great. And then in the last couple of weeks, we have this spike and has put a big strain on our operations. So first of all, I want everyone to know that, you know, keeping everyone safe is our number one priority, and we do have our mitigation factors in place, like we did last year. We have social distancing, as we have in the past. Our shields, we have them available. We didn't throw them away. They're at the schools. We have them available in case we need them, and that's something else that we will come back and talk to our principals about to see how we want to utilize them, again, in the lunchroom, if they are not already doing that. I think some principals are at this point. Sanitizing, washing your hands, and then, like we said, the optional mask policy. And then we also put in place, you know, no volunteers for the next 30 days, no visitors, and no field trips for the next 30 days. Just trying to do everything we can to mitigate. And I know some of the emails I received said we weren't really doing any mitigation, and we are. We really are, and we meet with the principals frequently to make sure that we understand what they are doing, and we give them all the autonomy at their schools to do what they need. They have different populations and so forth. Also, you know, our return to work and return to learn information is online for anyone that would like to see the mitigation that we have put in place. My big concern, here's my big concern. The contact tracing and the quarantining has resulted in many employees and students being out of school and out of work. That is very concerning. We need our employees in order to function properly to serve our students, obviously. And we've had positives from adults, employees, and many of those were from also vaccinated people who are vaccinated and are also positive. But when you look at quarantining, you might have between 4 and 30 people who need to quarantine based on one positive. So now you have a lot of people at home. Most of those aren't sick. And so there's a lot of students who might be home that aren't sick. There might be employees who are home who aren't sick. And for instance, I know you brought it up earlier, Ms. Brown, about one of our schools, 35 adults, employees out yesterday, and I think it was around 31 or 32 the day before. You know, we need our employees to be able to run our school system. Our transportation department, which I'm going to turn over to Jody here in just a minute, transportation, food service, custodial, you know, we're having a hard time getting all of our kids to school on time because of the number of people who are out. In food service, we're having a hard time with food service. We have a couple of schools, and Jody will mention this, a couple of schools we had to do grab and go today because we don't have enough food service people to run our cafeterias. and cook our food. So I'm very concerned about those, and we are constantly looking at ways to mitigate that and try to get substitutes and different people in there to help us in the operations. What concerns me is, yes, we're able to handle it and figure it out right now, but if it gets worse, this isn't like anything we've ever seen before when it comes to from an operations standpoint of our school system. And so we're very, very concerned about that. I know that, here in our district office, we've had many, and I know they can speak to this, but we've had many people who were out either quarantined or positives. We had a few positives. I know of 3 of the 4 were vaccinated people. And then you put quarantine on top of that, and all of a sudden, there are many people out of the district office who we depend on every day to help our schools run properly, and they're not here. And so I have now said we are going to go back to Zoom in our cabinet meetings, and we're also Zooming our principal meetings. We can't afford, I don't know how to mitigate all this, but I do know this. If we're on Zoom maybe and we're not next to each other, hopefully we won't catch it and we won't get quarantined and we'll be able to continue to go to work. I do know that. And I've also asked our folks at the landings to wear their masks. Because I know we are in a lot of meetings together, and sometimes they're lengthy. Some are Zoom, some are not, some cannot be. And so just being aware and wearing their masks, especially when they are around people. And so putting all that in place for me is very, very, very important. And I wanted to now go ahead and turn it over before we even get to any kind of talking about masks, whether we should do masks or not masks or what we're going to talk about with masks. Just trying to make sure that we can operate properly and make sure we have mitigation in place, and what anything else that we could possibly do, we need to be looking at that, especially during this spike. So I'm going to turn it over to Jody, and then possibly others at the table would like to speak to. I know Steve and Brandon probably would like to speak to the principals and what's happening at the schools. I know assistant principals, I'll tell you right now, and they'll probably tell you the same thing. Assistant principals are contact tracing all day. They are not talking to teachers about instruction. And when you ask them about that, they say, "Are you kidding me? All I do all day is contact trace." That's what they do right now. And there's multiple people at the schools that do that and help with that. And so it is what it is, and we're trying to work through it the best we can. But when we are spending all of our time on that and not on instruction, that concerns me, because now we don't have enough people in the schools to help us with the operations. Our students aren't in class face-to-face like they should be. Conversations aren't happening as much as they should be as far as monitoring instruction in our school sites. And so I'm concerned about our students' education because of all this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jody. If you can take it from here, I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Asplin. I appreciate it. So let me start off with my conversation on the way in this morning. It was a call to Sarah Dan to kind of check on status, and Sarah Dan was cashiering at Ashton this morning. And so that is kind of a flavor for what's going on in many of our operations departments. I'm reflecting on what Dr. Gordillo had mentioned in terms of staffing at Sarasota Memorial Hospital. It's very much the same thing in operations for us. It's really the perfect storm. It's not so much COVID as the one single problem at this point, but what you have in a lot of these operational departments is really a lot of vacancies we've not been able to fill because of the economy. And so when we start off a school year with 50 vacancies in transportation, and then you add in 8, 9, 10 COVID cases, and then you have a workers' comp case, and then you have the normal sick, all of a sudden you can't cover bus routes. And so that is really what's going on in all of our operational departments. It's a combination of the economy and not being able to fill jobs at some of those levels. COVID now starting to take hold, where you've got numbers of employees starting to get quarantined and or testing positive. And then the normal, workers' comp, sick, those types of things. And so we're beyond our ability to meet our normal service level in many of our departments. So what does that look like? Here's what I know we have, and that's an awesome team on the operations side, directors who are talking daily and sharing staff between departments. So we are absolutely, I'll use the word mitigating, we're absolutely doing everything we possibly can on the operations side to pull from other departments to help across the lines where we're most critical. The problem with that is the well is only so deep. And so, for example, right now on custodial services, we're about 50 positions shy of where we need to be. That's a combination of everything from unbeing able to fill jobs to COVID. What that translates into is at night, we have a number of vacancies, routes that aren't covered. And so we are pulling from everywhere else in the district to get those covered. That means maintenance. That means everybody who will work on those second shifts to help cover those custodial routes, because we know trying to get as much sanitizing done at night, especially on those touch points, turns that school around for next day to provide that clean environment. Just know that that's a struggle. And last week we had facility managers, we had custodial specialists who were supposed to be supervising. They're all cleaning routes. So that's kind of custodial. On food service side, Dr. Asplund mentioned that we are going to have to start adjusting menus. That started to happen today at Ashton and I believe at Laurel Nokomis, where we limited menu options because we have not a huge number of people in food service, very much the same thing, a number of vacancies and COVID on top of that. But in food service, the COVID has hit food service managers and main dish cooks. Those are not, we can't backfill those with Jody Dumas. I can't go be a main dish cook. So as that continues to start to happen, what we do is we pull in people where we can, and then we start to limit menu items. Then we get to grab and go. And so we are doing our best in food service. Right now, we have custodians who worked second shift last night on lines this morning serving for food service to try and cover lines, right? So that is happening right now. In transportation, again, another perfect storm, 50 some odd vacancies, 8 to 10 to 12 to maybe 15 COVID at this particular point. I was sharing with Dr. Asplund a route breakup sheet last night out of dispatch for yesterday's PM routes, and everybody in transportation was on buses. Yesterday afternoon, we had one route supervisor in a vehicle to respond to accidents in the entire county, and we had Jason in dispatch, running dispatch. So what happens with all of that is, there are people waiting on bus stops and route changes and all that. Well, our main goal is trying to get kids back and forth to school. So what I'm trying to paint for you is a picture where I think we've got an awesome team, like I said. I think we're doing everything we can to try and make sure we're mitigating and trying to meet the service levels that we've promised schools. But we're getting to a point where it's getting really, really difficult to do that. And we don't have a good well to go to and answers for that. So as Dr. Asplund, says, what are we going to do about this, Jody? I'm in a position where I don't have a lot of answers, and I'm not used to that position because, again, there's always usually somebody with an answer that can help me. So I want to just make sure everybody understands kind of where we are in operations, and we're doing everything possible. But we are a few COVID cases away from, having to do things in transportation like double backs. What that means is the same driver for the same school runs 2 runs. Well, the second run is an hour and a half, 2 hours late to school or back home. And so that's the position we're in, and we'll continue to do our best and keep our fingers crossed and be creative as we can with solutions. But that's really a picture of what's going on with operations at this point.
Steve, Brandon. Steve.
So, first of all, I'd like to say that Jody's brought a lot of things to the table, some challenges that they face. But I'll also say it's incredible the amount of work that's getting done by a few number of people, and we're very proud of how everybody pulls together, in an environment that we're in. So, with all the challenges, Jody, and I would say that the principals would say this too, is you're doing a great job of organizing around that lack of staff. From my perspective, it's just interestingly, every Sunday I send out a message to the principals and the APs, and we talk about what's coming up this week and what happened last week, and we're getting school started, and it's generally a very positive message. And this week I was talking about flipping the switch on instruction. We got through the first week. That's always master scheduling. The enrollment increases. A lot of challenges there, finding places for students and flipping that switch on instruction. So, so I wake up Monday morning and the first thing is I'm taking phone call after phone call after phone call. I always check in with principals as best I can, and they're checking in with me. And was this the number from the weekend, just the number of students who were COVID positive? It was a large number. It's not something that we saw last year, and it's definitely a difference in what we're seeing this year. And what that means is if it's an employee, we have to find somebody to cover that classroom. if it's a teacher. If it's a teacher's aide that supports ESE students, then that student potentially may not be getting those services that day. If it's if it's any of the other support assistant principals, I have one school with 2 assistant principals out, I have another school with a principal out. And that principal said, during pre-service week, I was one of several people that was wearing a mask all week, and he ended up positive. So ultimately, I think you're dealing with this pattern of we get in the morning, we see what's come through the Department of Health, and we start contact tracing. I mean, immediately get my team together and let's start contact tracing. And they're very good at it, and they're keeping an incredibly. We talk about this all the time. The positivity of the staff out there, the administrative staff, is incredible under some very challenging circumstances. The instructional staff, I just spent, before I came here, I spent a couple hours walking through classrooms at a school, and the teachers just so positive, and they're working so hard. So, at the end of the day, with all the challenges that's kind of put forth, everybody's, it's an amazing kind of environment that we work in. Everybody's coming together to support everybody. And that's what you really need in an environment that we're in. So I'm very proud of the work that everybody does out there in that environment. I think our biggest challenge right now is, when you're just talking about contact tracing and the number of students that we are contact tracing, the number of adults that we're contact tracing, making sure that everybody understands the protocols, understands the rules on when they can come back and when they're leaving, and making sure the data gets updated, which is challenging for the Department of Health just because of the sheer numbers that they're dealing with. So I think from my perspective, instruction is happening every day, and ultimately it's not what we are comfortable with. We're used to in Sarasota County and comfortable with, but at the end of the day, I think we can feel good just the work that everybody's doing to make it happen in the schools every day.
Sonia? Or Brandon?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Osman. I guess for me, it's been interesting because Steve and I talk daily. I had to remind myself as a principal told me this was only the first week. We're just on the second week. And for example, the first day of school, and Dr. Osman knows this, we had a whole administrative team out, and I was the administrator at the school. And that's how the school year started. And so as you have conversations with principals, from APs being out, principals being out, one elementary school that sits at about 30 staff members had 13 teachers out one day. And so, yes, they handled it. They're resilient. I actually walked that school today, incredibly positive, working hard. But that doesn't negate the fact that this is still a daily occurrence that they're dealing with when it comes to contact tracing. A big piece from one school that called me that's incredibly large said their challenge has been, even when they do everything they're supposed to do and send everything in, it's the actual information that comes back from DOH that all of a sudden is taking a while, and that then all of a sudden parents are no longer happy. They understand the process, but when we are not doing it in a timely manner, they then get frustrated. So on top of that, you have students out, you have staff out, you have administrators out, but you also are now getting family members that are saying, parents of our community, I'm a little frustrated that the turnaround time is not happening. I understand what you're doing for mitigation. I understand you're working hard in teaching. But listen, when something happens and I get it 3 days later, that's a concern. And so for us, that's a big part of it as well, is making sure that we can communicate in a timely manner everything that's going on. But you heard the gentleman today, there's so many cases. So the more cases we have, the more information we submit, the longer it takes to get back. They're continuing to work hard. I called 8 different schools today, and their only focus was enrollment. They wanted to know about staffing. When I would push a little bit more, it's, yes, today, starting in the morning, the first thing we did was go on the bus and contact trace the bus because we had a COVID case last night. And so that actually had one school, 2 different classrooms out. So 2 whole classrooms that are all out today that they're now having to support. So unfortunately, I'm usually a very positive person. I'm going to continue to be that way, and I know our principals, especially in elementary, but I at least wanted to be honest, Dr. Asplin, just given the circumstances that are happening, and that we're just starting the second week of school and that we're having this conversation. And just to reiterate what Steve said, Jody, in all honesty, there have been 0 complaints from our side about the work you guys are doing, and we truly appreciate it, even understanding the circumstances that are surrounding this. So just thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I would just like to echo, again, everything that's being said. It is truly a team effort, and everybody is doing everything they possibly can. In the end, it's about safety number one. So anything that we can do to go ahead and mitigate those circumstances, because, second priority on our list is instructional continuity and making sure that those kids can stay in school. You've heard it multiple times from multiple folks. We want to offer the best that we can to our kids and support our students and our families. And so, again, kudos to everybody for the work that they're doing. Brandon, I know you are a positive person, and I know you're smiling under that mask. So, again, I just, it's just hard because here we are. We have just started school. We've got a strategic plan that we are serious about. And, we know the effects. We understand the effects of what COVID and the pandemic had on schooling, teaching, and learning last year. And here we thought we were going to be somewhat back to normal-ish. And here we are. But that strategic plan, it's all about instruction and making sure that we're meeting the needs of every single student. So everything that we can do to possibly make sure that that still remains our focus right there, right behind the safety and well-being of all staff and students, that just needs to ultimately be our number one priority. So
well, I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, and Sonia, I'll come right to you. But as you were talking about strategic plan, everything else that we do that's non-COVID doesn't stop. We're trying to get all that done, but it's taken a back seat to COVID. Go ahead, Sonia.
Well, for our department is supporting our schools and protecting our teachers so they can protect our most significant students with disability, to all students. And the challenges right now that we're facing is that when staff is out, they have been placed in quarantine or they're sick, we cannot find replacements that are specialized for our most behavioral challenging students. So when our principals are calling us, we're sending our district staff. We have been in schools just trying to support understanding those very specialized plans for these specialized children to keep them safe so teachers can teach. And it's been very challenging these few days and last week because staff that are specialists are out, they're sick, and we cannot find replacement. But again, very positive, trying to collaborate and respond to principals and teachers' needs.
Well, thank you. And I do appreciate all that you are doing, and I do really appreciate everything our teachers are doing. I know in traveling around to the schools, like you said, and going into classrooms, they haven't missed a beat, and they are really trying to provide that high quality instruction that they always do. And so I just wanted to let you board know where we are right now. And I know that you'll probably be talking about masks and utilizing that possibly as another mitigation strategy. Remember, right now we have optional masks, and then we do recommend people wear their masks if they're unvaccinated. That's where we are right now. So and you can see in the district office here, I've asked them all to start doing that because we can't afford to lose any more of our employees because we will just not be able to run the school system. So with that and the fact that we need our students in classes, we just need to do everything we can. No one likes wearing masks. Nobody in this room does. Nobody in the whole district likes wearing masks. And everybody wants to be free to choose what is best for their child and themselves. I agree I'm 110% on that and 110% on not wearing masks. But at the same time, I can't put my head in the sand to what's going on in our school district on a daily basis. We have to be able to operate our schools, to serve our students, and our students need to be in schools so that they are getting the proper education. So that's my update on COVID, and I'll just turn it back over to you for discussion.
I just want to give an update on what our numbers are. There is a COVID dashboard on our school website, and we get numbers from the Department of Health every evening around 5, and then those numbers are input, and they come up. Currently, the numbers haven't been input yet from last night, but currently we've had 235 positive cases for elementary students, which is much higher than what we had last year, especially, we're talking about after 1 week of school. Well, I think we had maybe like 30 before school started. We had 199, I know, the first week of school, that 4 days. But when you add in the K-8 combined schools, it's 274 elementary students. And we've had 73 students in middle school and 145 students in high school and this is our 5th day. We included some numbers from July 1. It might have been kids from summer schools, but most of them were probably outside. But most of these numbers happened in this last week, is where they came. I don't have the numbers to tell us what those were, but we can look at that.
Madam Chair, those don't include charter schools, correct?
And those numbers do not include charter schools. And of course, we heard some numbers from the county health department that includes all numbers, all students that are, out in private schools, home schools, whatever. So those numbers are out there that we need to think about. And now we'll go to questions or comments from board members. Ms. Ziegler.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to Jody and team. I know there's a lot of you. Actually, I don't think there's a ton of you, but I think, but given the work you have to do, and I think there's a lot of different buckets we have to look at. And a lot of this, we talk about mask or not mask and mitigation, but it all comes around safety. And so the operational piece gives me sincere pause, particularly when you think of transportation. I think that's probably the easiest for anyone to understand. We have schedules and efficiencies, but that also relates to families of being at home and picking up and having children at bus stops, or all those variable trickle-down effects. And so if we're getting to the point where we aren't able to provide the transportation, and I appreciate you sounding the alarm now, because and I wish you had the answer, but I respect that you don't, because I wish all of us had the silver bullet to all of these questions. But I think that's really important. And so I have spoken to the superintendent, and I'm at the same agreement where we know it's best for students to be in person learning. That's the best environment for them to truly, really thrive. We find ourselves again in unprecedented territory, even though we thought we were ready to start the school year normal. But at what point, there is one school that we have a lot of staff out, and there's a lot of high-risk students there, and there's a lot of high-risk scenarios that are there. And I know that there's a lot of planning behind the scenes in addition to responding to COVID. And so what is the plan of action when we meet, if there's a certain threshold where we become inoperable, for lack of a better term? And I have no question it's all hands on deck, and you guys have been incredibly resilient. Our students, our families are resilient. But when we think about safety from all of these all these scenarios, and I know other districts are dealing with this very similarly, and I don't need you to have that specified number, but can you speak to that for whoever's watching to understand, so that this is not something we're waiting to hit and then we have to adapt to, but these are questions and answers that we are going through and modeling, contingency scenarios right now?
Well, that is a great question.
I only think of the best one.
Having us go through this the first time we've actually, that we've gone through this to where we're at a point where we are operationally. And I know I asked the same question of Jody. Okay, Jody, at what point do we just have to shut down the system? And I know he doesn't have a great answer either, but I'll turn it over to him. We have to be able to operate the school. We have to have people to do that. And we've never done it before. I don't know, as we work our way down, we try to be as surgical as possible, right?
Right.
All of that. We're trying so hard to do that, but at what point do you call it a day? I'm not sure. Jody?
Well, and I think that depends on the department in what you're talking about, right? So I think we've got several, and department directors are really on top of thinking that through, right? So if this happens, then what? If this happens, then what? And it's kind of a layered approach in every department. And so, for example, a lot of conversations with Jason and his team about bus drivers, right? So that's not an easy fill because, I carry a CDL, but I don't have a school bus endorsement. So we've got people in facilities who can come and help with that. We've got to get those endorsements on their licenses. So we're talking about that. We've asked for volunteers to do some of those things. And so trying to be creative in every department. So I think the way I would answer your question is it's every department's a little bit different depending on the situation we're handling. And we're trying to be creative in every department to say, okay, if that, then what do we do?
Okay.
We'll continue to work through those issues and looking at all avenues. But like I said, it will be being creative in transportation to say, okay, everybody that can possibly drive a bus, how do we get them the license to do that?
Thank you. And how about at the school level? Because I know one of our charter schools, and I think, and first of all, thank you to the number of thousands, I want to say, of people in the community who have emailed in. And I wish I had been able to get back to everyone, but I did read them. But we did get one from one of our charter schools, which obviously we don't have any governing oversight on these topics. But there was an indication that the staffing was getting so low, given contact tracing, and positive cases, that there was a notice to prepare in the event they may have to temporarily shut down. And I don't know if those words were used in that case, but how are we navigating and evaluating that at the school level?
So I'll just go ahead and respond, and if Steve and Brenda want to go ahead and add into it. But again, I think the first is working, again, with Department of Health, just really what are those thresholds, kind of taking a look at those, from their perspective, but also at each individual school. I think it is a little bit different every single site. Right now, we see numbers that are absolutely alarming, but when you do look at those and separate them by school, in some cases, not ideal in any way, shape, or form, but manageable. And so again, I think that's where we're really trying to look at, what's the impact on individual schools? Is it in a classroom? Is it a grade level? Is it amongst staff? And so I like Dr. Asplin's terminology there. It is really a surgical approach. And so one, we're looking at and monitoring it each and every day. The approach that when we spoke to you, I think it was 2 weeks ago, with the contingency plan for instructional continuity, one, we've just started that. It's been about a week now. And so, having an opportunity to kind of monitor and see how is that working for our quarantine students first. Secondly, I want to make everybody aware that on August 25th, a team of us from the Sarasota County School District will be actually going over to Orlando for a state-sponsored instructional continuity planning session. And there are 4 that are offered throughout the state, and it's really for all of us to be able to brainstorm together collectively on what's working, what worked in other districts, what are you doing now, what can we expect, and how do we anticipate and prepare to make sure, should a call ever have to come where it's a classroom or grade level, an individual school have to consider shutting down, what might that look like? And so it's going to be an opportunity for all of us to collaborate together and plan. And that is next week.
And I guess, some of this again is rhetorical, because I know there's been a lot of offline discussions, but I know there's a lot of people watching right now, so I think it's really important to, one, we're sounding the alarms on some of the central kind of facility elements that do play a role. And so there's an element of being patient, understanding the very unique circumstance that we're in, and also being visible, particularly on the mitigation and cleaning and all of those things. But as it pertains to the instructional standpoint, that you guys are being surgical, looking at it. If you aggregate the numbers, it is alarming, but when you peel back the onion and you see of it so far, as you guys evaluate, which are constantly being evaluated, that you guys are doing so far so good. I mean, given the circumstances. And the one piece of that I think is really important is, as we walked into this year, as we saw the spike, which concerned me from just the sheer disruption of, in any way you want to think of it, is if we have a number of people being out of school because of quarantining and staff, the disruption that gives to their academics. And I know that there was a plan with giving packets for elementary, and then we have Blackboard. And what's the other one? Blackboard.
Yeah, that's right. If you want, Brandon can speak. Brandon and Steve.
I just didn't want Blackboard, and I'll pose a question. But the reason is that some people do really well with that. Some people have a struggle. Some people may end up being quarantined more than once, and then when we start to chip those away, whether it's 5 days, 7 days, 14. I know it's not 14 days really typically anymore, but that really eats away. And so, and my understanding is that each school is handling that kind of on a case-by-case basis from a support standpoint. And I want the public to know this, because we've had a lot of people bring that up, and I know we talked about that. And so to provide for, and I don't know that this isn't in a true existence, but almost like a liaison from a quarantine standpoint to make sure we're supporting our families, supporting our students. Can you speak to that?
Go ahead.
No, and that's exactly correct. And I realize, like you said, this is for everyone to kind of hear, even though we talked about a couple weeks ago, is that students that are quarantined, contracts are in place that every single school can do it, either during the day to support them when they come back and provide interventions, and also reach out to them when they're at home. And also, we also have in place for teachers after school that they can also contact their students and work through the process of how are they actually doing. Because the reality is this, they're out, but the relevant information that's being sent home is also information that's taking place during the day. And so we need to make sure they're still on par when they get back on campus.
Right.
So that's been happening. You're right. It's been 1 week. So far, so good, but you're still talking a lot of students that we are supporting. And I think the reality, and Mr. Renoff spoke to it, is being able to monitor this as we go week in and week out and have that understanding, what else do we need to do if we notice all of a sudden this isn't working up to where we think it should be. And I know in middle and high, a little bit different.
And again, we're running short on time. We're supposed to end at 2, and we still had something else. So I'm going to give the members 5 minutes each, and then we'll talk about if we want to extend the meeting to allow for more discussion. The procedure stuff will go on to next meeting, if that's okay.
Very important, yeah.
Karen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to have a few validations from my perspective of having worked in a school feels like my entire life, and the district office. There's a couple pieces that alarm me. One, that we have our hospital asking for help. Two, that we have district staff now going into schools. For me, that is a alarm that we have our typical structure of how we handle any and all emergencies is a system and a network of who does what when, and those people are now consumed in running schools at the elementary level, at the secondary level, and we have challenges with getting students here and challenges in feeding students in our cafeteria, if I hear you correctly, Mr. Dumas. And I'd like, and I believe I hear the superintendent saying that we are in a position right now where we need to reach deep into what our next steps are. We've talked about, I know Mrs. Ziegler brought up the very important threshold piece, and I'm not sure we have that answered. I'd like clarity from you who are leaving your district positions, who monitor emergencies from the district level outside and on a daily basis that aren't typically a COVID or Delta crises. I'm not sure we have that answered. Are we hearing from top administration and from our superintendent that we've arrived at that threshold? Because I don't want to land at a place that we're shutting down parts of our district. We're not able to feed students. We can't get students to school and say that's the threshold and we need to do something. I don't think we're peeling that away enough to be very explicit, because our number one goal, whether you see mass as from your particular family standpoint, a strong or a weak mitigation, we're arriving at the point where I know we all agree schools need to be open. And I don't want to get to a point where we're closing a school or schools, or we're not handling the typical emergencies because we're trying to keep schools open. I think the public needs to know that the people that are sitting here, the top administration, the executive administration, run our district, and it's very much a strong network of handling an emergency, and I'm seeing that fractured right now. So I think that we have some things we need to discuss and get some very direct requests from you. There's at least 3 of you that are leaving your district positions and going into schools to run a school to keep the school open. And that's disregarding getting students to school and disregarding the challenges with feeding them. Thank you. So please, what's that answer?
Oh, you.
Have we arrived?
Well, as I was saying before, being as surgical as possible, when you look at classrooms and you look at the numbers of students who may be out quarantined or not, homesick or not sick because of their quarantine, you'll have a handful here and a handful there. So not enough to shut down a classroom, for instance. So we've had a couple that have reached that point where you might have 2 students left face to face. Well, at that point, you need to work remotely as your teacher into the homes of these students, and then maybe farm those 2 students out to other teachers face to face. And so we have creative ways of doing things, as you know. And so we'll continue with that. I think my biggest concern is more on the operations side, and at what point can we not transport students effectively, and we end up saying, okay, parents, you're on your own, you need to drive your child to school every day, or we can pick up in these particular neighborhoods, and that's about it. And then food service, at what point do we have to work through that? Now, again, everyone's very creative, everyone does a great job, so it's hard to say, when will we stop feeding kids? Because we will never say that. we're going to do everything possible, and get everyone hands on deck to get in there. So yesterday, we were at a point yesterday where after hearing everything I was hearing, I was letting everyone know on cabinet to let all your folks know, because we have many assistant principals and past principals who work in the district office, that they just need to be ready to go out to schools whenever there's a need, because I'd rather empty this building out and fill our schools than to have to shut down a school site.
Which is an issue for me.
Yeah.
Because our system, I think the public needs to know that at the point at which we start emptying out the district office for everybody who, I for one am very strong advocate of the parental rights bill. I'm a strong advocate of families having the options they're looking for and staff. And I know that the feedback I'm getting that we've leaned in that direction from a visibility standpoint. But what I'm also hearing is that they also want the quality. And I'm hearing that we may not be able to provide that quality because I don't want to hear, as an individual board member, I'm alarmed that we're emptying out, district people, because for me and in my experience, the public needs to know at that point the typical emergency that can occur any day in any school that we've spent years building and planning for has been fractured. Am I correct in saying that? I think your mic is on.
There we go. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And so I would say we're at a point where we need to, again, talk to our principals and go over our mitigation factors to see, is there anything else we can do? Are we doing everything we can possibly do so that people aren't quarantined and are at school or at work so that we can continue to run the system? So I know we're at that point and we're just pulling out all the stops, and whether things work or they don't work, we don't know, but we're going to try it. And so that's the point we're at.
So could I add?
What I'm hearing from parents, though, and I'm sure we're all getting it, is that we aren't trying hard enough. There are, too many of those protocols that we had last year that are down, and that there's too many kids in classes without masks. And I'm hearing from teachers, from psychologists at school, how a child who was scared and asked this, am I going to get COVID from being here? Because there was nobody in his classroom, and there he was afraid. So we aren't doing everything we can, and I think we need to take actions to do more. And there was one mom who said that her child was told that he was wearing the mask, and the teacher told him that his mask was useless because it doesn't stop those 0.1 particles of COVID going in. When we have staff that disincentivize wearing masks to a 7-year-old, what are we doing? We aren't doing everything we need to do, is what I say. So I know we're trying. I know we're doing things. And I'm sure that you didn't expect the numbers. We set up our opening school plans early in June. As soon as we were done, we were setting them up. But things changed. And I know it's, like we've said, changing a tire on a moving car. But somebody's got to stand up there and stop that car. And I think maybe that's what we may be able to do this afternoon. And I don't mean to be, I'm sorry. I'm not yelling at you. I'm just saying we all need to work and do more. Jane?
Okay. Yeah.
There you go.
So much for the new microphone system. Well, I want to thank you all for the work that you're doing. And I know it's hard, and I know it's not going easily. But we got to decide whether we're going to instill a mask mandate or not. We can hedge around and talk about and clip the hedges and do all kinds of stuff all day long. But we got an hour left before a school board meeting, And I think what we've got to do is do a mandate for masks, period, and not parents opt out, because we can't keep up with contact tracing right now. It's taking an AP at some schools a whole day to do contact tracing. If I go to Ireland, they will contact me by this phone. They will do all the contact tracing and everything else right on my phone. They will tell me every time I've been around someone or anything else. Why can't we do that here? I mean, why aren't we doing that in the United States? It makes absolutely no sense to me at all. But if there's any way that our wonderful Joe Benswanger could find a program that we could actually automate some of this manual Excel stuff, I think we ought to look at that, because maybe this isn't going to go away for quite a while longer. But, you know, I'm ready to really look at this, and I know that there's some ramifications, like the governor's emergency statement order last week. I know all of the bad sides of this. I've talked to board members all over the state. But I, for one, am ready to say this community really needs a mandatory mask mandate, and that is it, pure and simple, no exceptions, just a mandatory mask mandate for a month, and see where we are, see if it helps, because kids aren't wearing masks. They really aren't, and this contact tracing thing is really, you know, bringing us to our knees. And I guess we need to order more masks in the warehouse, Jody, because I'm hearing we don't have any masks, the kind that we supply at schools. So, you know, our schools are in really tough shape right now, and we've got to do as much as we can to mitigate. And as Dr. Gordillo said, we're in a symbiotic relationship, and boy, I believe that, and our hospitals are in trouble, and God forbid somebody gets stacked up in an ambulance going to Sarasota Memorial and one of the other hospitals, which is going to happen in the next week if these numbers continue to grow. And I just think it's time to cut to the chase.
Mr. Edwards.
Woo, man, long time coming. I was just going to say, we got to get this elephant out of the room, because I've been asking and discussing, I should say, with Dr. Asplin for over a week about having an emergency meeting, not for masks, but get it off the table. Are we doing it? Are we discussing it? Are we going to go against the executive order of the governor and break the law, and answer the call of plea from the hospital? Are we going to do it? If we're not, and it's going to stay optional, then let's move on, because I heard crisis right here. And I got to stop having the mask conversation and sucking all that air out of the room and get down to what are we going to do? What do the numbers look like to shut down a classroom? What does the numbers look like that we have to go to doubling up all the busloads? I got to get to those conversations. And by the way, I was discussing it with Dr. Asplin, and our conversation was, hey, we got a hurricane pointing at us, and it's coming fast. And sometimes they turn left and miss us. And we would have made those best laid plans for nothing. But guess what? That hurricane is at our back door, and we got to get this mass conversation done with these 5 people. Do we want to vote on it? And how do we want to vote on it? And how soon can we vote on it?
Tom, I can answer some of those questions, because we have an existing optional mask policy, and we normally cannot change a policy without the 28-day advertising, unless the superintendent or the chair calls an emergency meeting. It is my intention to call an emergency meeting, and at the board table, we will discuss when it happens and all. There is a time frame. We can't vote on it today.
So
we can vote to have an emergency meeting, you know, we can, you know, at that time when I do it, I will use Dr. Gordillo's comments and the part of the Secretary of Education's letter, and we will do that probably before we hear the comments from the public, so that they know where we're at, what we're talking about, so they can make those comments to that. But I do plan on calling an emergency meeting.
I just want to go one step further. If there is no interest in breaking the law and doing it,
get it off the table.
Right, okay.
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm getting slammed by both sides. I'm sure you all are too. The community is so upset and so divided that we can't get work done. We have to stop fighting. 50-50 is the way I'm seeing it. And
No,
we
I'm
got to
seeing
get that
1-1.
off the table so we can get to work at educating our students and trying to figure out how to keep them in the seats. That's what I want to get to.
Right, and you guys can't do a lot unless we take some action, too. Brennan, and then Bridget. You forgot?
So all I would say, I wanted to kind of comment on Ms. Rose. You had some great comments there, and I appreciate the concern around the district office. And I think I don't want to paint a picture that I want to make sure that we understand that we're always here to support the schools. That's our job. And I always joke with the principals, I work for you, you don't work for me. And that's just the way it is. Teachers, I say it to them all the time. And so, I think we're not at a place yet. I would never put us in a position where I couldn't respond to an emergency at a school. That would never happen. I want the public to just understand that, I think all of us are striking that balance right now where we need to be. There may be a time when we push more and more people into the schools to support schools. But I wasn't real comfortable with leaving that conversation that, I'm spending every day running a school. I'm not running a school. I'm spending every day supporting schools. And if they need me to come by and check in and support here or there, typically what we're doing is we'll assign assistant principals where a need is based on all the circumstances that we're dealing with on a daily basis. So I just want to make sure that the public and people understand, and Ms. Rose, you understand, we're not there yet. If we get there, that'd be another conversation. But I think
How close are we? Because that's the question.
Yeah,
I mean, do we want to wait till we're there?
Yeah.
I mean, that I understand in operations that it's more challenging than structurally in a school, but how close are we? That's an important decision. We've talked about the community being 50-50. We're here to represent the community. We as individuals are, entitled to our beliefs, however strong they are, but the one common belief that we all have is we need to keep schools open, and we need to have the greatest safety we could possibly have, even if COVID wasn't at a crisis level as the hospital is sharing.
Thank you. I have Bridget as the next queued person.
Well, I want that question answered.
Okay.
How close are we? To me, it's a vital question.
So let me ask a question then. How close are we to what?
To where we can't keep our schools open safely.
Right. So I think what I can say is I think we need to use every single type of mitigation possible for us to continue so we don't get to that point. But I know we're getting close to that point. And I think Jody said, in transportation, there are what'd you say, 3 or 4 positives away from not being able to make some runs?
Yeah, and so the tough part and everything, and I understand the questions are being asked, and it's I don't want to seem like I'm eluding the answer, but the reality is with COVID is people are rotating out and people are rotating in, right? And so every day that number is flexing a little bit. What I would say on the operations side anyway, and I think probably my colleagues would say the same thing on the educational side, is there's always been an answer at this point that we can do this to do that, and then we get a reprieve with some people that are coming back and so we're okay for a couple days. So we're sounding the warning on operations saying we're tight. We have not had an answer at this point, but again, we get a big event with a lot of contact tracing. And the other thing to understand is with COVID, last year our numbers, there were a lot of contacts and fewer positives. But because we were in the first week of school, most of our cases that you were seeing in the dashboard are all positives because they hadn't ended up on campus yet, right? So they were calling in saying, hey, my student's positive, or I'm an employee, I'm positive. that transition is starting to happen. So
Yeah.
now you're getting positives in the work sites and in the school. And so now you're going to see a lot more quarantines exploding. So that, I think from our perspective in operations, that's what we're really worried about, is that, you're going to have the quarantines starting to hit us now, and can we handle that? And I guess that's the question moving forward.
So you're saying we're there, that it's not guaranteed next week or tomorrow if we keep up the same rates?
I would say in operations, we're day to day.
Oh, okay.
And,
Thank
and
you.
Mrs. Rose, I would say instructionally speaking, we're not day-to-day. I mean, the reality is we've been able to get in, cover with teachers, subs. Are there times where they're unfilled? Of course there are, and that we're supporting there as well. And as Mr. Kenty said, I do feel like my job is to support them. So even when there may be an AP or a principal there or one out, and I call and say, can I support you? Can you please stop by? 100% I'm going to. Just like I stopped at a school this morning. Was there an hour and a half? They were perfectly fine after that, but the reality is I know they felt comfortable me just being there and being able to assist if they needed anything. They did not at the time, but just having someone there to support says a lot, given that I'm aware of everything that's going on and that they can actually find me, talk to me, and know I'm there throughout this process.
I would like to extend.
Mr. Renoff had something.
I'm sorry, but we're out of time.
I'm
And what
happy to
liking-
go,
I
so
would like to make a motion to extend the time.
Second.
15 minutes.
30 minutes, I'll go 30.
The only thing that I would like to add is, again, on the instructional side, I don't think we're there yet. Again, all it takes is a single outbreak or something like that of a spread on a given campus, and it could change circumstances. But right now, again, as both Steve and Brandon have said, we've got people, they're stepping up, they're able to fill in. I guess where our concern is one, the unknown. So two, I think anything that we can do to put in mitigation strategies is essential. We're pulling Title I teachers out of their roles for instructional support and remediation to cover classes. We're having to do that. Again, we're utilizing our instructional specialists from up here. We're sending them out into the schools so they can go ahead and fill that void. We're going to continue to do that no matter what it takes. But yeah, the effect, it's there, but anything that we can do, any steps that we can take, that's what I would recommend.
Thank you.
Bridget?
Thank you. To Mr. Edwards, I'm happy to answer that question because I agree with you so we can move forward. And I asked the safety, I'm not trying to skirt it because I'll wear it on my sleeve, kind of where I stand. I think you guys probably already know with the mask discussion. But the reason is this discussion being so important on the operations side is that we can either take an approach of reactive, and listen, if everyone's saying we want some effect to kind of get some effective and mitigation tools on the plate and try everything under the sun to do it, I'm hearing that, I understand that. My concern is I want to make sure we are 4 steps, 5 steps ahead so that we're not saying, hey, we're hearing from everyone else that's saying, let's do a mask mandate, yada, 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 when we see other districts that have done it, and we haven't even gotten to the enforceable side, but I'll get to the legal side in a second. Other districts that are doing it are still facing the very similar problems that we are too, and I do not want to say, oh, we checked that box, but we haven't addressed what I would argue one of the bigger elephants in the room is the operational side. And it is not a negative to anyone, because I know you guys are working around the clock. It is the reality of the situation. I don't want to wait until, hey, we'll focus all this time on masks. I don't want to give the sense that, hey, it's going to give a false sense of security when we're still going to see, when you say you're 2 or 3 out, your margin of error, maybe +5, I don't know what it is, that's a day, really. And that's concerning, and it's not because of anything you guys are doing wrong, but those are things that the community needs to know. I'm excited to hear the instructional side has a little bit more flexibility, but we all know if kids can't go to school, that's all for nothing. And so transportation is hugely impactful, and it's the reality of where we're at. So I'd like to dive into this discussion a little bit more from an operations side. What is our true contingency plan? I believe you guys truly are trying to navigate it and being surgical, but it's starting to it's getting exponential. It is growing on us. Masks or no masks, we're still having a quarantine. Everybody knows that. So that's an important piece. So that's knowledgeable. That still exists, and that's still going to be disruptive, and it's highly transmissible, so we're going to still see those numbers. So I think we need to think further beyond that of what some alternative options are to try to mitigate the spread. Not masks only, but some even potentially remote who people want it, not for everybody, because those are going to maybe alleviate some issues and tensions from families that are out there, because it is hard. I know everyone feels the same way when you read those heartfelt emails that people are genuinely concerned, and I'm not to deny them or invalidate that concern. I want to make sure we provide options, and I want those options to work and be meaningful and also alleviate the tension that our operations are feeling too. If that, to me, those are more effective ways to slow this down. So as far as the mask goes, if you guys want to have a vote or figure out, I don't know that we need to call an emergency meeting to call it emergency policy. I think to chair, you certainly had the authority to call an emergency meeting, or the superintendent. I will tell you that the way I see it is I think that there are masks that are effective if they're N95s and they fit properly. It's hard to find an N95 for pediatric. The ones that most of us wear are cloth. And that is less than, I don't even think there's reports that illustrate it. They only say triple layered cloths are less than 26% mitigation effective. Now, I understand everyone wanting to do whatever they can to mitigate it, but I don't want to give people a false sense of security. When you read those emails, parents are genuinely concerned, and I understand why. But instituting a mask mandate, which I do not believe to be enforceable, which also puts more burden on our staff that are already at very worn thin, is my concern. So with that, if we want to figure out what the votes are, I would not be supporting a mask mandate.
The emergency meetings under School Board Policy 2.22 says that emergency meetings may be held at any time by the superintendent, either under his or her initiative or upon the school board chairperson's request. An emergency meeting may be called as quickly as complying with notification procedures. School board members shall be given a tentative agenda during the notification. And I believe there's a 24-hour notification of an emergency meeting, Patrick? 24 to 48 hours? We can't hear you. Check your mic. They're not working as well as they're supposed to. It's still not on?
Working.
You got to press it in a different spot.
Over to the left.
In order to have a vote on an emergency policy, you need to have an emergency agenda, and I would recommend having a draft emergency policy for consideration, then permit the public to have meaningful access to that by putting it online and giving them the opportunity to be heard before a vote. So from a practical standpoint, it's going to take a very small amount of time to put together an emergency agenda. It needs to be based on factual findings, much of which occurred today, and I think we could adopt all of the testimony today as those findings from Dr. Drennon, from Mr. Drennon, from the doctor from the hospital, and based on the impact from our educators here today who have testified firsthand. So it will still take some time to make an agenda. It will take some time to draft an emergency rule and give the public meaningful input, but certainly by Thursday, I think we could have an emergency meeting and a vote if that was what the board wanted to do. And I think we could justify the need for immediate action outside the normal policy change procedures based on the testimony today.
And I would think that the agenda should probably be more inclusive than others. I think we have to have the emergency for the masks because we currently have a policy right now. And so then we would have to be asking, do we want to have a mask mandate for staff? And do we want it for elementary students and others the same? And should we allow opt-outs? And then we also have to look at kids and or students, and do we have a policy for students in elementary school and that for middle and high school, and is it different? Because we might want to have a 90-day, that's as long as the emergency policy could last. It would be 90 days perhaps for elementary, and whether we want to do 30 or 90 days for middle and high school. And the issue about the opt-out, and will that have to do with the governor's requirements? So those are the kinds of things that we have to look at. We also could look at requiring vaccines for employees or negative tests to come back in. But those are the things that I am proposing in my emergency meeting call. I would like for us to think about that in the time between now and our meeting. When this is called in the afternoon, I will do this, and you can give us some input on that. But the governor's call does not have anything to do with what we have to do with our staff. So those are two different things. We can't just have an across-the-board mask because we have to handle staff masks one way and students another, only because of the governor's mandate and the law that's out there for the students, the Parents' Bill of Rights. And then we look at it, and then we'll look whether or not we want an opt-out, and we'll take votes on those things. And that's what I'm thinking about, and we can discuss that this afternoon when we come back. Tom, because we can't make decisions here.
Okay, so what I'm not making myself clear, so I will try one more time. Exactly what happened when Mrs. Ziegler was talking about the urgency of what needs to be addressed with operations is why I was asking for an emergency meeting last week, because I think this is more important. And then she rolled into the mask conversation, segued, made perfect sense, but they're two different conversations and debates in my mind. And what I'd like to do is keep them separate and get to this sooner than later, because I hear crisis. I saw the crisis and the handwriting on the wall for all of this last week. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that we have to get that mask conversation somehow behind us quickly so that our time is better spent on what's more important. Okay, so I hope I made that as clear as I possibly can.
Yes, you did it, and I agree. I had wanted one last week too, and I was discussing things with the attorney and the superintendent, but it's past time to call it. Ms. Rose?
Well, I feel like we should be immediately addressing that we're at the point in operations. I think that is like the highest priority of what is the plan, and does the superintendent have a plan, and is it authorized? I think that is, for me, at the top of the list, that we will be able to get students to school for the rest of this week and next that isn't dependent on a few of the numbers increasing. Do we have a backup plan?
So, Ms. Rose, let me address and clarify. So students will go back and forth to school. They'll be late. We'll pack buses. I mean, we'll do everything we can. It's not like we won't get them back and forth to school, but in terms of how we're going to get them there, again, if we're having to double back, which we have not done yet, but potentially that's, as we talked about those layers, right? First, we have every driver on, then we start to break routes up, then we put supervisors on the road. We do all of those things. Last in our packet right now is we do a double back. A double back is I do a run for pick a school, Alta Vista. I do the run for Alta Vista, my normal run. I come back and do a run that wasn't covered. So by the time I do that run, I'm impacting an hour late at Alta Vista, but then I've got 3 tiers of runs. So now I'm in a problem at the high school, I'm in a problem at the middle school, so that gets later and later and later. So will we get kids back and forth to school? Yeah, if I got to run vans, we're going to put kids back and forth to school. The problem becomes the service level in terms of how late that becomes. That's the question, and so that's what we're trying to avoid. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will adjourn, and when we come back for the meeting, I'm sure some of the things that were said earlier will be said again, and I can't imagine that we won't have a lot of people coming here for the meeting to speak, and we'll deal with that. And but there won't be a mask mandate vote today. What we will have a vote on, well, I guess we don't have to vote on the emergency meeting. What we have to do is come up with the time and the date. Because if but I can't call, I don't know that I can call the emergency meeting during a workshop. I will do it at the board table this afternoon. We stand.
So now it's, I gotta find an extension cord.